Thank you. Welcome to our May 12th regular session board meeting. I think I see Commissioner Randy Smith out there. Thank you for being here, Commissioner. Any other elected officials? All right, thank you all for being here. Just a couple of announcements. Our commencement ceremonies will begin on May 27th and run through June 8th. And I wanted to take a moment to congratulate each of our graduating seniors and their families. This has certainly been a year like no other, and your resiliency through the challenges you have faced has been, to say the least, very impressive. We hope for success and happiness for each of you. Please remember that graduation is not the end. It's only the beginning of your journey, and we wish you nothing but the best. Ms. Satterfield, would you like to provide us with an update regarding our 2021-2022 student representative, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. First, I would like to say thank you for allowing me to serve on this committee. But this year's Student Representative Selection Committee process began back in February with the announcement and distribution of application packets to every high school. Rising seniors until Thursday, March 25th to submit an application to the board office. 13 applications were received from students at Bearden, Carter, Central, Farragut, Gibbs, Hardin Valley, Carnes, L&N STEM, Powell, and West High School. Once received, the applications were redacted from all personal information, including the student's name, school, gender, address, reference names for the first phase of the scoring process. The selection committee consists of Secondary Education Executive Director Danny Trent, Principal Angie Messer, current student representative Abigail Lee, community members Anderson Olds of Boys and Girls Club, Chris Whitehead of Emerald Youth Foundation, and myself, Eva T. Satterfield. We met on April 15th to receive instructions provided by Mr. Trent on scoring the application in the areas of leadership, communication, organizational skills, academic achievement, community service, extracurricular activities, and recommendations. Each year, the committee commits to interviewing the top 3 or 4 candidates, taking into consideration any natural break in the score. This year, the top 4 candidates were interviewed by the selection committee on May 4th. Top scoring student was contacted and offered the position for 2021 to 2022. They will serve starting July 1st and end June 30th. And without further ado, I am happy to introduce Raymond Jen of Farragut High School. Let's give it up for Raymond. You want to take a picture with me?
Sure.
Raymond will join us on the June board meeting and sit by Abigail to learn the ropes. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Satterfield, for leading our committee and doing that great work. That's a fun one, so I'm glad you got to do it. Okay, board members, just a reminder that late Monday afternoon, you received an updated version of Mr. Watson's proposed resolution being considered as item 10C. Both the original proposed version discussed at our work session last week and the updated version are attached to the electronic agenda for your reference. You also have a paper copy at your table with the redlined amendment as it would appear without the redlined amendments as it would appear in final form if approved. Are there any other requested changes to this agenda? Okay, do we have a motion to approve? Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Watson. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And now I'd like to refer to Superintendent Thomas for a special recognition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to recognize one of our outstanding administrators this evening. Shay Seiler is the principal of Carnes Elementary, and she was recently selected by the National Association of Elementary School Principals as the 2021 National Distinguished Principal from the state of Tennessee. Those of us who know Mrs. Seiler are well aware of her strong leadership at Carnes, which is one of our largest elementary schools. I want to read a few highlights from the announcement that was shared by the Tennessee Principals Association. TPA said Ms. Seiler has focused on 3 goals: principal mentoring, staff development, and professional learning, serving as leadership coach with the Tennessee Department of Education. The TPA also noted Ms. Seiler has been a strong advocate for mentoring principals and that her focus on strategic instructional practices has resulted in improved reading scores at Carnes. I think it's also important to point out that all of our principals this year have faced enormous challenges related to the pandemic. Mrs. Seiler has done an excellent job of leading her building through this very difficult time. Know that Ms. Seiler will be an excellent ambassador for KCS when she attends the National Distinguished Principals Award Ceremony in Washington, D.C. this fall. So please join me in congratulating Shay. And if you'll come to the front, we have a certificate for you.
And I would like to refer to Ms. Coatney now for the reading of the items.
Item 6, consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie. I think the second was Ms. Satterfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
7A, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy D-110, annual operating budget as amended.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Ms. Christie. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
7B, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy D-280, fundraising activities amended.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Watson. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 8A, approve ESSER 2.0 grant application and budget overview in the amount of $50,810,033.57.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Satterfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
8B, approve consolidated grant application and receipt of funds from the State of Tennessee Department of Education for federal Title I-A, Title I-C, Title I neglected and delinquent, Title II-A, Title III, and Title IV in the amount of $19,204,488.06 for fiscal year 2022.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. McMillan. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 8C, approve consolidated grant application and receipt of funds from the State of Tennessee Department of Education for special education services in the amount of $13,960,832, IDEA Part B, and for preschool special education services in the amount of $419,163, IDEA preschool for fiscal year 2022.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. McMillan. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 8D, approve Tennessee Arts Commission student ticket subsidy grants for various Knox County schools in the total amount of $30,947 designated for tickets and other related expenses for virtual arts events.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, was the second by Ms. Owen. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
8E, approve Battelle Education STEM classroom grants in the total amount of $17,500 for Beaumont Magnet Academy, Dogwood Elementary School, Cedar Bluff Elementary School, Hardin Valley Elementary School, and Mount Olive Elementary School designated to classroom STEM projects as outlined in each school's proposal.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Satterfield. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
8F, approve memorandum of understanding with the University of Tennessee for the 2021 Shakespeare in Shades program at Vine Middle Magnet School and receipt of grant funding in the amount of $14,531.78 designated for teacher stipends and student bus transportation.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Satterfield, a second by Ms. Christie. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
8G, approve Siddiqui Foundation grant in the amount of $8,000 for Christenberry Elementary School designated to the school's garden and playground gaga ball pit.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Watson. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
8H, approve receipt of Gen Youth and the Dairy Alliance COVID-19 Emergency School Meal Delivery Funding in the amount of $2,000 for Gresham Middle School and $2,000 for Northwest Middle School designated for reimbursement of expenses related to equipment and supplies needed for feeding students during the COVID-19 pandemic.
So moved.
Okay, I think we have a motion by Ms. Christie. The second was Ms. Babb? No? Ms. Henderson? Who was it? Ms. Henderson? Okay, Ms. Henderson. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
9A, approve amendment to contract with Achievement Network for provision of curriculum implementation support to incorporate additional terms and conditions for student assessments platform.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Babb. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 9B, approve contract with Metro Communications LLC for provision of distributed antenna system for the term of June 1, 2021 through May 31, 2022, which may be extended for 4 additional years, 1 year at a time, as limited by the capital improvement plan budget.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie. I couldn't tell who the second was, so I hear Mr. McMillan. Okay. And any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
9C, approve contract with Rouse Construction Company for construction of additions and renovations to Bricky McLeod Elementary School at a cost of $3,538,160 using capital improvement plan funds.
So moved. Second.
I'm sorry, who was the motion? Ms. It's so hard to tell with these things.
why I
I
know.
cannot hear. Okay, Ms. Bounds, second was Ms. Christie. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
9D, approve contract with Henley Roofing Company for roofing project at Sunnyview Primary School at a cost of $543,400 using capital improvement plan funds.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. McMillan, a second by Ms. Christie. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
9E, approve contract with George Armour Ewart Architects, sole proprietorship for the design of West High School softball facility at a cost of $150,000 using capital improvement plan funds.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Babb, a second by Ms. Christie. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
10A, approve general purpose budget line item transfers for the period of January 1, 2021 through March 31, 2021 in the amount of $88,383.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Watson. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
10B, approve applications for Knox County Schools virtual elementary, middle, and high schools.
So moved.
We have a motion. Was that Ms. Babb? Ms. Babb, a second by Mr. McMillan. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
10C, approve resolution of the Board of Education of Knox County, Tennessee, requesting the review and revision of the current memorandum of agreement between Knox County Schools, Knoxville Police Department, and Knox County Sheriff's Department, City of Knoxville, Knox County, Tennessee, and Knox County District Attorney General through an open community engaged process.
We have a motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Ms. Satterfield, and I believe we have public forum.
We do have public forum speakers, and I'm just going to remind some people about our public forum policies. Public forum speakers shall address remarks to the entire board and not individual members. Each person speaking shall state his or her name and county of residence and have up to 5 minutes to make remarks unless time is extended. Members of the board and the director of schools may have the privilege of asking questions of any person who addresses the board. The board respects and appreciates the good intentions that bring citizens to speak at public forum. The board asks that speakers show their respect for the board, the staff, and other citizens by speaking in a manner that is civil and courteous, and we also hope that all will be courteous to all that is speaking. So we will start with Jay Lockhart. Is Jay Lockhart here? Okay. Josie Maynard. Okay. April Burns Norris. Oh, yeah. Come on up to the podium, ma'am. And when you get here, if you will, I'll wait till you get up here and I'll give you instructions. Not a problem. So if you will start by stating your name and your county of residence, and then you will get 5 minutes to speak, and you'll see the timer count down, and we do have to stop you when when 5 minutes is up if you go past that, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
So my name is April Burns Norris, and I'm currently temporarily residing here in Knox County to care for my father, who is fighting stage 4 prostate cancer. I'm originally from Knoxville, but I moved to Nashville, Tennessee in 2013 after I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I went and admitted myself into a dual diagnosis program there so that I could really get the most benefits from recovery as far as learning about my diagnosis and learning how to adjust to society without trying to self-medicate and just on the roller coaster. And in the process of that, I experienced a lot of disability discrimination, which opened up the door for me to create my own nonprofit organization that is addressed to help correct the barriers that I face as far as in the services as far as supportive services that people with disabilities need, as far as housing, as well as mental health. And in the process of that, when I went there, I was considered home. So I was also involved in addressing the Knox County School in the state of Tennessee with their student in transition program. I found a lot of resistance there and here, even once my daughter came back to go to school here. And I think a lot of it is because of the lack of information, and it's not being shared. And so I felt myself having to train the people that were already paid to know these things. And it let me see that there's a great need for someone to be an advocate for the people that are currently going through things that a lot of you all will never experience unless you've lived there. And so in the process of that, I've lived in my car after being evicted wrongfully for trying to form a tenant union as a member of Homeless for All Nashville. I was retaliated against. I have cases in the state court, federal court, so forth and so on. And so I'm here now to care for my father, but my daughter, my youngest daughter, is a student at South Door High School. And that brings me to being a parent as well as a former student of Austin East High School. My oldest daughter graduated with honors from Austin East High School. And even though I was a 15-year-old high school dropout, without having parents there for me to teach me the things that I needed to know, as well as suffering from a mental illness that I wasn't aware of. The road was rough, but I made it through in spite of all of those things. And in the process, I've witnessed the issues that are preventing people like myself and others from being the best person they can be in spite of the conditions. And so with what's going on right now with the school, whoever recommended the task force, and I know they, took that off, but I really feel that considering the history of the East Knoxville community, this violence and this gun stuff is nothing new. I even experienced dealing with these children that are experiencing a lot of issues at home first, before they even get to school. And so when we just throw 2 hours of therapy at the children and not even address the parents at home that are often suffering from things like I was when I was raising my daughter, 15, trying to be a mother, we're children trying to raise children. We're doing the best we know how to do. And I feel that we have to address this issue as a community. And it's going to take our voices to be heard on a task force. I feel that we should be involved in the schools. It should be a requirement. It should even include truancy. If people don't attend, that's when truancy should be enforced. I'm working with other community organizers that are already providing security for the area in East Knoxville, and they're doing things with the children and trying to get the parents involved. But without financial support and a voice and a platform for us to be heard fairly, and actually be done something with, then nothing's going to change. This has been going on for so long. And I was an in-school suspension teacher at Carter Middle School for 3 years while my oldest daughter was going to middle school there. I was assigned to one of the worst bus routes in Knox County Schools. And it was because there was so much violence coming from East Knoxville to Strawberry Plains. And, the job that I had as an in-school suspension instructor gave me some insight. We were trained in crisis prevention and intervention techniques, kind of wondering why the police are not automatically trained with as much as we were trained with. Now that they're in there addressing these issues, that I feel that if the community and the family were trained and retaught, a lot of us don't know. It's things that I'm still learning today that, it's because nobody was there. And the reason nobody was there is because the things that have gone on
Thank you.
have
I do
prevented
have to
that.
stop you now, but I appreciate you coming.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I would want to come back, and I wanted to encourage y'all to reconsider, because
Okay. Thank you.
we got to do something different.
Ann Loy. And if you'll state your name and county of residence, then you have 5 minutes to speak.
My name is Ann Loy. I'm in Knox County and in Jennifer Owens School District. What makes a school safe? This article from an October Retired Teachers magazine says police-free schools. I'm a retired elementary teacher and principal, retired for 20 years after educating for 30 years. I'm married to Don Loy, also retired from teaching chemistry and physics at Farragut High School. We're still interested in public education, Don being the immediate past president of the Retired Teachers Association in this county. This article piqued my interest and concern in October when I read it, and I tore it out. And after the death of Anthony Thompson Jr. at the hands of a police officer in Austin East School, I made copies along with a personal note to mail to appropriate leaders in the school administration, local governments, and city and county uniformed officers leaders. I now have made enough copies, 9 copies for you, and I'll mail them to you later this week. Several teachers spoke on the subject for this article. A Patterson, New Jersey math teacher, Mr. Thompson, said, "You ask a kid what makes them feel secure at school. I doubt they'll say police officers. What they'll talk about is their friendships, what they're learning in class, and how their teachers and staff respect them." He went on to say they've been talking about this for a long time, but more people are realizing that people are not making our schools safe. Another teacher in special education in Minneapolis contributed a story about her daughter who got into a physical altercation with a boy who had been taunting and violating her repeatedly with vulgar comments and touches. The administration knew, the teacher said, but yet they hadn't done anything. The SRO, or school resource officer, stepped in, grabbed the girl from behind, and slapped handcuffs on her. The girl had had enough and couldn't take it any longer. She needed school counselors and school psychologists to come in and calm her down. The teacher asked, "What are we doing to our students? Do they do what I say now, or I'm going to get physical with you?" Is that really what they need to hear? How is that going to help them manage their emotions and learn the skills they need to help resolve conflicts? I know that education is way underfunded, and the police officers and sheriff's deputies are probably well funded in comparison, but we need the helping staff in our schools. We need training in mediation and de-escalation. In this article, a student attending a middle school in Montgomery County, Maryland, noticed a difference in the school climate with school resources officers compared with his elementary school, where he felt safer, where teachers could try to solve the problem if a fight broke out. In my note, I told of teaching second grade for 7 years at the former Eastport Elementary Schools, which served Walter P. Taylor homes in East Knoxville. A boy from deprived school grew angry one day, stood up, and threw his desk against the wall. I got up, put my arms around him gently, and rocked with him, standing and saying quietly into his ear, "It'll be all right. It'll be all right," until he calmed down. I didn't call the office for Mrs. Evan Williams, the principal. She never knew anything about it. This is the kind of help children need. I still have the photo, though, of that boy when he grew to a man in the newspaper being arrested for killing somebody. I'm part of the community that's asking for a great change in the way we treat students in schools, and to help teachers and staff to understand these kids and maybe to be kinder and more loving towards them, plus do our best to provide supplementary mental and psychological help in each school. Thank you for letting me speak today.
Thank you very much. Lisa Fontarosa. If you'll state your name and county of residence, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Lisa Fontana Rosa. I live in Knox County, Tennessee. My name is Lisa Fontana Rosa. I live in Knox County, Tennessee. There's absolutely no way I can fully express the extent of my anger with Mayor Kincannon's decision to pull KPD officers out of schools on June 12th. This is reckless. My son attends a school that will be affected by this decision. Our school had a shooting years ago. My family wants police protection in our school. My family's voice matters. Decisions like this should not be made hastily or without community input that is owed every citizen in the Knoxville community. There's absolutely no reason for the city and KPD to withdraw from the MOA in order to discuss and negotiate a new agreement. After speaking with our KPD officer and Dr. Brown, our principal, this morning, I would like to share some input from Dr. Brown. Our officers attend 80 hours of training each year, 40 hours state conference, 40 hours national conference. Security in the school is not enough. If we are going to protect students from potential outside threats, we need police. They are aware of potential threats in the community and can alert schools much faster. Dr. Brown fully supports officers being in our school buildings. He said if we want police to change the way they respond and be more proactive rather than reactive, we need them in schools to get them to know students and build relationships with them. He thinks it is important that officers are proactive rather than reactive. By having officers in schools interacting with students on a daily basis, they have the opportunity to build trust and prevent situations rather than react as an officer responding off the street. My principal could go on and on about how important they are to our school and building a positive culture, but he realizes that is not the case everywhere. He said he is willing for anyone who would like to come and witness how Officer Edwards interacts with our students to stop by anytime. Officer Edwards is intentional about being visible and getting to know our students. He thinks it is important that we change how officers are viewed and clearly define their roles in schools. So in closing, I would like to say that our children have already been used as political pawns for COVID. Now let's not use them as political pawns when it comes to safety in our schools. That's not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. We are going to be respectful for everyone that comes to speak here tonight. Charlie Dorsett. If you'll please state your name and county of residence, then you get 5 minutes to speak.
I'm Charlie Dorsett from Knox County. I would first like to thank the board for all the hard work and effort put into making our school safe this year. It's been amazing that we've been able to come in person all year, and it has quite been enjoyable for me. I am a 10th grade student at Ellen Sim Academy right in the heart of downtown. Many people each week walk onto our campus, some not knowing that Ellen is a school, some wanting just to look inside, and others wanting to interact with the students. I once had a lady come up to me and my friends and asked to play volleyball with us. Another time, some people walked right up to the school just to come charge their phones. This is just a normal day on our campus. And at times we rely on our SRO to keep unwanted people off of the school campus and off the school grounds to keep us safe. I am very thankful that they were there. However, having several officers not equipped to work with children is too much. School is a safe place to learn and even make a few friends. No student or teacher should have to come into school worried about if their incident at their school will be the next caused by a KPD officer not trained to work with children. Sorry, I lost my place. I am eternally grateful for the safety that the KPD officers enforce in our community, and I'm grateful that they are there to help us. However, a line must be drawn. If officers in our school are not trained to work with children, they should be where they're trained to work. If police officers work with children, they must be trained to work with children. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Carrie Hopper. If you'll please state your name and county of residence, and you'll have 5 minutes.
My name's Carrie Hopper. I live in Knox County. I come before you today as a former KCS staff member and a current advocate for students living with intellectual and physical disabilities. I previously worked at Fulton High School in the CDCA department, and am now employed as a behavioral therapist for children and teenagers with intellectual disabilities. Many of the students and clients I have worked with over the years do not see and process the world in the same way that you and I do. Many of the students and clients I have worked with do not have a strong sense of danger, nor do some of them have the ability to speak up for themselves if they experience abuse or wrongdoing. Having police in schools poses a huge threat to our disabled students. First off, police are not trained on how to restrain or physically handle students with physical disabilities such as cerebral palsy or other diagnoses that might cause low muscle tone or like a spastic syndrome similar to cerebral palsy. So that poses a huge threat. Also, students in special education and KCS all have IEPs, and many of them also have behavior plans specifically designed to deal with maladaptive behaviors that may arise due to a variety of factors. But I learned at our last meeting here that when KCSO and KPD officers begin interacting and arresting students if behaviors arise, that their department automatically takes over and takes the jurisdiction, and KCS no longer has control over the situation. So if a student on a behavior plan with an IEP is having maladaptive behaviors due to their disability. And sometimes those might look violent to us because we don't understand what's going on in the student's brain with their disability. And the police take over and start arresting that student. Last time I was here, I heard a story from a mother that happened to her child. KCS can do nothing about it when, like, special educators have written a whole behavior plan, a whole IEP, and how to deal with these behaviors. That's against the student's rights. A student with a disability cannot help having maladaptive behaviors and sometimes violent behaviors, and that's why we have IEPs and behavior plans. If a student with an intellectual disability who maybe saw a gun on TV and thought it was a cool toy reached for an armed officer's gun, would the officer shoot them like they shot Anthony Thompson Jr.? If a student with an intellectual disability brought a gun to school thinking it was a toy, would the officer shoot them like they shot Anthony Thompson Jr.? Anthony Thompson Jr. had a gun at school, and he was shot and killed. If a student with a disability brought a gun to school thinking it was a toy, would a KPD officer do the same thing? I think they would. Police in schools are not safe for anyone, but they are especially not safe for our students in marginalized communities. Students with disabilities, Black and brown students, LGBTQ students are all at risk for police violence, both inside our school buildings and outside of them. Do not begin a new MOA, take the police out of our schools. Invest in mental health workers for students and other preventative measures against student violence. Each one of you that votes to keep police in schools after the death of Anthony Thompson Jr. has blood on your hands. Think about it.
Excuse me. Erin Bates. Is Erin Bates here? Please state your name and county of residence.
Erin Bickness, Knox County. Sorry, I'm just getting here from work. My name is Erin Bickness, and I'd like to speak about the issue of school safety. My educational background is in conflict resolution, and for most of my adult life, I've worked with children of all ages from preschool to high school, in school settings, non-traditional educational settings, and also as a volunteer, such as through the Amachi mentoring program with the child for the last 11 years whose parents are incarcerated. When we're thinking about school safety, I'd really like to encourage us to think expansively and really increase what that means. I think we can use our imaginations to go much further than just doing a tiny little better job in this direction or a tiny little better job in that direction, or just increasing what we've been doing all along. In a lot of the schools I've worked in and attended, I went to lots of different schools as a kid and as a teenager. Very few of them had police there. The ones that didn't had a lot of things that made those parents and children and staff feel perfectly safe to send their kids there every day. They had doors that locked well, and they had staff that were able to be there to welcome people. They also had the kind of teacher-student ratios that allowed every student and child to be seen and known and to be noticed when something was going wrong. They had funding for after-school programs and activities that meant it was the norm for kids to have something to do. Some of those schools had 98% participation in after-school programs that met all kids' needs, from sports to the arts to music. Those kinds of things allow for not just something to do and a safe place to be, but also opportunities for kids to connect with adults who then are on their side and on their team as mentors, as people to look up to. When I'm thinking about schools and communities, we know what makes them safe, and the safest ones do not have the most police. The ones that do are not the safest, and if they were, then adding more police, or if we looked at the place that had the most police, we would think, gosh darn, what safe places. Don't we all want to live there? But that's not how it works.
The communities that are the safest have the most resources. We are pouring the most into those children, those families, those economies. We're making them places that people want to enjoy, with parks, with funding, with all kinds of things that make lives full. When I think about what happened with Anthony Thompson Jr. and his death last month, I think about so many things that could have prevented it, and police clearly weren't one of them. Some of the things that would have prevented it would have been teachers with enough time and energy to pay attention. I know all the teachers care, but if we had better funding for our teachers, they would also have the luxury of not being rushed all the time. They would be able to keep an eye out. They would be able to develop those strong relationships and be there when things are going wrong. We would have strong counseling programs and conflict resolution programs. We would have education beginning in kindergarten with age-appropriate information about safe relationships, respecting others' boundaries and bodies, and how to communicate when you have disagreements. We would have curriculum on emotional literacy and programs outside of law enforcement for parents to call when they need outside support. The verb to police has nothing to do with protecting or improving or supporting. It rather speaks directly to hovering over people, ready to keep them in line. This attitude and this approach that comes with having police in schools, this is the attitude and approach that comes with having police in schools. There are police, and then there are people being policed. If we are seeing some communities and thus some schools as being in need of policing, that says a lot about what we think of as the problem and how we see the people, not as people just like us, deserving extra care and support and love to bring out our very best expressions of ourselves, but as people who might go wrong at any turn, who need to be kept in line and punished when they do wrong. I don't like this way of seeing our kids. And in communities like East Knoxville, there is inherent racism in this approach. In applying this model to students in general, and specifically to our East Knoxville and Austin East communities, there's also inherent danger in thinking that our most capable problem solvers are the ones who carry guns. In all these schools I attended where the police presence was zero, like I said, we felt safe, and it wasn't because we knew someone with a gun would show up at any second.
Thank you. I'm going to have to
Okay.
ask you to stop. Thank you. Shannon, Harper, Jenkins. And if you'll state your name and county of residence, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Shannon Harper Jenkins. I'm from Knox County. I'd like to echo much of what Ms. Lloyd said. But first, I want to say that time is fleeting and very precious, and these meetings should be held at more convenient times and places to make them easily accessible to all. How can the voices of concerned citizens in East Knoxville, District 1 be heard and resonate as loud as those in Bearden, Carnes, and Farragut when the majority of our families are headed by single parents who often work 2 or more jobs? I am here to address the cops in our schools situation. Your resolution states that cops have been in school since 1950, but it failed to mention that it began in Flint, Michigan as a so-called relationship builder between cops and the youth, and the fact that the cops were teachers and counselors. I grew up in the 70s and 90s as a teacher's kid. I attended Sirmore Green, Green School, Spring Hill, Whittles, and Holston. And I don't recall seeing cops in schools except maybe at sporting events and when they were educating us on social dangers like drugs, child predators, and such. We had teachers and administrators like Mr. Bowden, Miss Lula Powell, Mr. Thacker, Miss Yarbrough, Miss Hicks, Mr. Mitchell, the Fultons, and Coach Anderson. They knew how to handle their class, teach and reach each child, and even the smarty pants, the class clowns, and especially the differently abled. They didn't need police. Your resolution further states that after the school shootings in Sandy Hook and Columbine, trained and eventually armed officers were put inside our schools. Exactly what are they trained to do? They definitely have the armed part down, trained to shoot and apparently kill, even if their so-called training jeopardizes students and teachers in hallways and fellow officers who might be involved. Let's be factual and honest. Police were created as slave patrols and continue to serve as such with Black and minority communities. The 1700s is the earliest known school gun violence incidents, and tragedies mainly involved adults who were shunned or scorned by lovers or kids or siblings who were whipped in school. Present day, as of April 2021, 53% of the violent gun incidents are carried out by whites, some of whom suffered from depression and who were being treated with prescription drugs. The irresponsible gun laws of government and their role in the flood of drugs and guns in our most underserved communities to fund wars, to entrap blacks, and other selfish acts are just a few of the reasons kids can easily obtain guns. You say trauma-informed school. Where was those resources when Anthony Thompson needed them? Where was his safe place? Where was the training to de-escalate and prevent his beautiful life from being violently taken at the hands of so-called trauma-informed school-trained SROs and KPD officers? Honoring Juneteenth, around here is August 8th, 1862, as a matter of fact, when Andrew Johnson freed his slaves. My family has been celebrating it for about 15 years now, ever since my mother-in-law told us about the day, that day being the only day blacks could go to Chahawi Park, and the Beck Cultural Center reestablished it in 2016. Look at y'all sitting up here. Y'all been housed in the Andrew Johnson building for so long, and y'all don't even know this. And now you want to honor Juneteenth all of a sudden because it got national attention. But honestly, teach the truth and the many contributions of Black history and stop whitewashing it. And maybe more of our youth will aspire to be more than a gang member or drug dealer or athlete or entertainer. Strategic efforts to hire more Black teachers is laughable when the majority of the teachers inside our majority minority schools are white, uneducated in the Black experience, and who do not live in or shop in our communities. Fact. Federal data show that violence in schools is not the problem, but it is school system failure to hire enough teachers and support staff to meet the mental health needs of our students. Fact, 25% of SROs surveyed admitted to having no experience with working with youth until they were hired as SROs. Fact, 47 states plus DC do not meet the student to counselor ratio. Fact, there is no evidence that cops in school improve safety. In many cases, it causes harm. Look at what happened to Anthony when they sneaked in the back door. If only they had known he was probably traumatized by the most recent violent events happening to his schoolmates, or maybe that he was differently able. Would that have mattered? Probably not, because I know we all have a date with death, and no one can delay it, and nothing can happen without the permission of the Most High. Fact, school-based mental health providers have been evidenced to improve outcomes for students and improve overall school safety. So we propose that mentors from the community are in our school buildings, building relationships with the students and their parents. We want to be a buffer between law enforcement. There are organizations that I am a founder of. Monarch Tribe Inc. for one is seeking to bring better opportunities for our students, like karate and fishing, other outlets for them to express themselves. There's an organizations called Pop 10 and Community Bridges, and Love is the Answer. We are already and able to be trained in positive youth development.
Thank you, Jay Lockhart. If you'll state your name and county of residence, and you have 5 minutes.
Tough one to follow. Good Lord. Jay Lockhart, Knox County. I come to you guys today as I've worked with you guys for many years, for the past 20 years. I've rebuilt Knox County Schools, rebuilt KCDC, the city of Knoxville, Knoxville Police Department, safety building, and the recent Knox County Sheriff's Office prison. Been working inside and outside of the East Knoxville, and been in each and every one of your schools over the past 15 years, as I said. One of the things that I'm here as a parent is to see with the way that the crime has been going, especially with being part of the gang task force here in Knoxville over a small period of time, to even think of removing officers out of the school. Are there very many options to fix the scenario and the problems that everybody has? 100% agree. More counselors, more money, more money, more money. There isn't a lot of money. So I ask that you guys not wait until the 24th, 29th of September to come up with an agreement, as Mr. I can't remember the guy's name, one of your board members said, for the resolution that you have. Your security officers, although I've met many of them, are wonderful men, but the training compared to a KPD officer is nowhere in the compared. It's 120 hours of training for the officer, 80 for school security, and 40 for the community. A security officer has 1 week of training, including firearms. So the principals who are to dictate what the security officer does 2 hours of online training for a shooter. online training for a shooter. So my question for you is the crime is there, the issues are there, the training for KPD is by far superior than what you have for your security officers. Wonderful people, but the needs to stay. Pretty much it.
Thank you. And there was one person I want to see if there was. Is Josie Maynard here? Okay, that concludes public forum on this. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, Josie Maynard? You'll please state your name and county of residence. You have 5 minutes.
My name is Josie Maynard, and I live in Knox County. I'm a senior at Career Magnet Academy, and I knew Anthony Thompson Jr. Since I've been a Knox County student, students have never been involved in the decisions made about their schools and their education. When you all look at the faces in this room, there are no students here begging you to keep law enforcement in the schools. You see a group of people adamant about wanting law enforcement out of schools. And you may think that your opinion is best as a staff member or maybe a parent of a privileged student, but it's time to stop thinking about yourselves. Think about the East Knoxville community. You all, myself as well, have privilege that other people don't always get. We have the privilege to not be scared of getting killed every time that we see an officer. We have the privilege to walk into your room and not turn heads. We have the privilege to say what we want and do what we want without consequences from law enforcement. And we have the privilege to be afraid and not get killed for it. Anthony never got those privileges. Most Austin students will never get that privilege. I have my own negative experiences with law enforcement just because I'm a woman. When I was 15, I was told by a police officer that I would never be anything more than a prostitute. And I've now exceeded my education, and I'm a certified nursing assistant, and I have my associate's degree by the age of 18. And I proved them wrong. But Anthony Thompson Jr. never got the opportunity to prove the officers wrong. He never got the opportunity to graduate, to turn 18, to say goodbye to his family, and he never even got the opportunity to finish his last sentence. Law enforcement in schools affects all minorities, and if you vote, or if you decide that you don't want to take law enforcement out of schools, then what is your solution? Until we see justice, you will get no peace, and we will continue to come to your meetings. We will continue to march in the streets, and we will continue to speak up for the people who never get to speak up for themselves.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you to all our speakers for coming. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm extremely grateful for all the many emails and phone calls and communications and speakers last week and even tonight, speaking to this resolution and to the issues around safety and security in our schools. If anything, I think those communications give credence to the need for this resolution, because I think what we're hearing, not from just the folks in this room tonight, but from many others that I've talked to over the last week especially, is that this is a conversation that's time to be had. It's a conversation that we need to involve the key stakeholders in, which is certainly our students and our parents and many others. I do think it's important for me to clear up some context around the resolution, given some of the actions that other people took last week after the resolution was made public. So I know some folks in the community and the media have been confused regarding the resolution that myself and Ms. Satterfield brought to the board last week. In light of the letter of the Board of Education received from the Knox County Education Coalition and the letter from Mayor Kincannon. It's important for people to note that the Knox County Education Coalition is a community group like many other community groups, and they have the right to write a letter to the board at any time. That doesn't mean it's on the agenda or up for discussion. But many people got confused in thinking that was the resolution. I can't tell you how many people I had to email and say, did you read the actual resolution? And they hadn't. And I don't fault them for that, but it certainly was an opportunity for confusion about what the intent of this resolution was. The resolution before the Board of Education tonight and the previous version last week was released well before the letter from KCEC or Mayor Kincannon's announcement last week. I certainly could have never imagined that those two things would have happened prior to the resolution being released. I even worked with Carly, and she helped me think through a press release as I released the resolution to try to get ahead of any potential stories that would divert from the intent of the resolution. So the current memorandum of agreement outlining the working relationships between KCS, KPD, and KCSO was completed in 2019. KCS's Chief of Security, Gus Paducas, took the lead on creating the MOA, at least according to conversations I've had with him. And now he has formally announced his retirement earlier this year, effective at the end of June 2021. I think it is time for the Board of Education, along with Central Administration, to revisit the MOA, but also to do that with community. According to Tennessee law, it is the duty of the Board of Education to review all contracts and agreements, no matter how big or small. The resolution I put forth and the board is considering does not mention anything about removing officers, not last week's version or this version. In fact, the resolution does not make a single recommendation regarding the MOA. And I can't tell you how many people in the media and others have asked me what my recommendations are for the MOA. And not one time have I given a response to that question. And the reason is, if I do, that completely circumvents the intent of the resolution. The whole intent of the resolution is to get the community to the table. This is not about what I think the MOA should be or should say. It's about inviting the community whose kids we are stewarding to the table to have this conversation. It simply outlined a public process for reviewing the MOA and offering recommendations. And the reason it outlined a process is because I don't think you have to come to any meeting with a blank slate. It was an opportunity to have a straw man that we could have dialogue about. The superintendent has been supportive of this resolution, as he stated last week at our meeting. I worked with him along the way. In drafting this resolution, I did speak with parents, teachers, administrators from various districts, central office staff, and other school systems even. Before the resolution was made public, Superintendent Thomas and I discussed who would approach Mayor Kincannon, Chief Thomas, and Sheriff Spangler to ask if they would support the resolution. The superintendent agreed to reach out to Sheriff Spangler, and he did, and he can speak to what he heard. And I agreed to reach out to Mayor Kincannon and Chief Thomas. A few days later, after I sent the original resolution to her, I did ask to see if she would support the resolution, and she did say that she would, and she was interested in engaging in the community process. Superintendent Thomas can speak to what Sheriff Spangler told him. In my 20s and early 30s, I was a chaplain for the Knox County Sheriff's Office for 7 years, and I had the utmost respect for law enforcement. I had the opportunity to partner with officers many times in helping navigate difficult situations, having witnessed firsthand the pressures they are under. My resolution is not a statement regarding law enforcement or the many men and women who serve. It is simply an opportunity to engage the public in facilitated conversations about what they would like to see regarding safety and security in our schools. And I encourage any and all community members who have something to add to the dialogue to come out to the community meetings if and when they're scheduled. I've been working toward KCS reviewing this memorandum of agreement with KPD and KCSO since shortly after I came on the board in September 2020, long before any recent events at Austin East or in East Knoxville. And the very first parent to reach out to me with concerns regarding the current MOA is a District 3 parent. In fact, she has addressed this board twice now. And she addressed this board about her special needs student. And I remember when she called me, the very first thing that I said is, that could have been my son. I have a special needs student. And I honestly pictured him being drugged down that hallway. And again, my statement is not an indictment on the police. It's to say, when you have law enforcement from different agencies occupying the same space, we need to be real clear about how they're supposed to interact with one another. And the current MOA is fairly vague. And that's not just my opinion. That's the opinion of other people who helped create the MOA, acknowledging that it's vague. So throughout that time, Chief Paducas, in my conversations with him, agreed over and over again that it is time to review the MOA. Not once did he express anything different or to the contrary to me. I am committed to reviewing the current MOA in a transparent, community-engaged process. I've looked to the community throughout my career and service, and I will continue to do so. I even ran on one of my priorities saying that the parents need to be viewed as valuable partners in education, and this is an extension of that. It is important for every student and parent to have the opportunity to speak into the agreement KCS has with local law enforcement. I also hope that this community conversation elevates the conversation around safety and security, even beyond the MOA. And as I stated last week, I'm 100% confident that everyone in this room and beyond wants all our students to be safe and secure. but I also know that means very different things to different people. I know as the father of a black son and as a mixed daughter that there will be a time, there will be a day when I have to have a conversation with them about how to interact with the police. Right now, they are borrowing from my privilege, and that is not, I'm not ignorant to that fact. And so I'm living at the intersection of many of these conversations, and they're important conversations for everybody to be involved in. So, many people perceive safety and security, and it is shaped by our individual and communal experiences, our past traumas, and our current realities. And let me say this is going to be hard and messy. Absolutely, it's going to be hard and messy if it's done right. But I also believe that all worthwhile endeavors are messy, but our kids are absolutely worth it. And so let me speak to the specific resolution briefly that you have before you. So I did go back and I listened to the board last week, and I appreciated the comments of the board. And basically what I heard last week from the board is that the board said, hey, we want to be at the table and help outline the process. I think that's great. And so what this new resolution does is basically say exactly that the board is agreeing to outline a community engaged process to review the MOA. So the way I'm going to read just the 4 bullet points that got changed at the end, because I think it's important for the board to understand the intent of this and also the community at large. So after all the whereas statements, it says, now therefore be it resolved by the Knox County Board of Education, the board respectfully requests the Knox County Police Department, the Knox County Sheriff's Department to enter into a transparent community engaged process to review and possibly amend the current memorandum of agreement with the Board of Education. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education, the Director of Schools, and the executive staff shall hold a publicly noticed meeting at the Andrew Johnson Building on May 19th, 2021 from 1:30 to 3:30. So just for the public's edification, the board's already had some internal conversations through our board secretary about that date and time, and that's been agreed upon. This MOA process review planning meeting shall have the sole objective of outlining a transparent community engagement process to review and possibly amend the current memorandum of agreement. Although this meeting is open to the public, it shall not include public forum. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education authorizes the Director of Schools to select and hire a skilled facilitator from outside of Knox County, Tennessee at no cost, at a cost of no more than $1,000, including expenses to facilitate the MOA process review planning meeting. The purpose of securing an outside facilitator is so that each Board of Education member, the Director of Schools, and the executive staff can fully engage in designing the process. If you're facilitating, you cannot be engaged in outlining the process. And so that's the reason why we need a facilitator. Can fully engage in designing the process to review the memorandum of agreement. Be it further resolved, the Board of Education shall hold a special called meeting at 4:30 on June 2nd. We already have a workshop scheduled that day at 5 to take possible action regarding the community engagement process to review and possibly amend the memorandum of agreement. The reason why that date is set separately is because, from my understanding, we can't approve the process that we outline on May 19th. So that's the next time that we're meeting. Obviously, all of this from a timing perspective is pretty important, given that I think everybody wants to see some resolution to this prior to the start of school. So I think we need to work with haste. And then the final part is be further resolved that this resolution shall take effect from and after its passage, the public welfare and requiring it immediately be sent to Sheriff Tom Spangler, Chief Eve Thomas, Mayor India Kincannon, Mayor Glenn Jacobs, and District Attorney Sean Allen. So again, I'm excited about all the folks that I heard from this past week and prior to that. And there's nothing that I've heard that says that the community does not want to be involved in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Board members, any comments or questions? Ms. Bounds? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Christie.
Well, I just, a couple of comments. First of all, I'd like to hear a little bit about Superintendent Thomas's conversation with Sheriff Spangler, if you can share about that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Christie. Spoke with Sheriff Spangler this afternoon for a few minutes and talking about the MOA, and his comment to me was he would be, first of all, he wants to serve what the Board of Education wants. He made that very clear that The partnership with the Board of Education has been important, and that's what he wants to continue to be able to do. He is open to conversation with the memorandum of agreement stakeholders. So he shared that with me. So that basically those were his comments.
Thank you, Superintendent.
And I guess, my big concern is, do we want this in place by the start of the school year? Is that what you're saying? Because I worry about the timeline. Ms. Coatney had pulled up the timeline for the last process, and it was pretty lengthy. It did start in the Disparities in Education Outcomes Committee, and started in the fall of 2016, it looks like. I think Mr. Oakes might be able to speak to some of this. There was some outside consultation with someone who is recognized as an expert in this field. But it was a very lengthy process. I believe it took 2 years, is that right? For us to
That's
get to
correct.
an agreement with everyone, and that did include the community meetings. So, yeah, I think we need to revisit it, definitely, and I would be very supportive of that and having those conversations with all the stakeholders. But I am a little concerned about the timeline if we're saying that it needs to be done by August.
Yeah, Ms. Christie, there's nothing in the resolution that speaks to an end date.
So we would just keep the current one until we had a new one in place? Is that?
I mean, I'm not suggesting anything different than that. I mean,
Okay.
we have an agreement. Obviously, the mayor said that she is removing KPD from the agreement effective June 12th. So, I mean, at that point, it'll be a two-party agreement. But yes, I would expect that on May 19th, when we meet, we would outline a timeline. So.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Christie. Ms. Bounds?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate Mr. Watson reworking his resolution and addressing the fellow board members' concerns. I still have some concerns with the whereases, and I would have mentioned this last week, Daniel, except I didn't know you were going to rework the resolution and bring it back. The first 8 whereas are very factual and to the point. I feel like whereas number 9 and 10 is a little bit more of a platform, or it's just a little bit more ambiguous. I know that the superintendent, if he said it one time, he's probably said it a million. We all know his 3 priorities, and one of his goals is to eliminate disparities. And I'm very thankful for that being a part of his goal. However, for the past 7 years, we have not developed a policy where we've gone beyond mentioning names and groups. And so I'm very concerned about that. So I just really don't feel like that I can support this resolution. I'm not sure you're willing to strike whereas 9 and 10,
So
but I
can
don't.
you, because they're not numbered, I want to make sure I'm counting them correctly.
It is whereas the Board of Education recognizes historical compounded trauma, and whereas the Board of Education is deeply committed to affirming the lives of all students as evidence. So it's those 2, and I really just don't feel like we need to list all of those things in this particular resolution. I don't think it's consistent with what we've done in the past and in policy review meetings to list the work that we've been doing. And I don't think we can affirm Black lives unless we affirm other
Excuse me, we have a speaker. Excuse me.
We have so many different nationalities and languages in our community. And in the past.
Excuse me, this is our meeting. Ms. Bounds is speaking. Excuse me. Excuse me, you can sign up to speak at public forum next time we hold it. Ms. Bounds has the floor.
So we have the goal to eliminate disparities. And as I said, to reiterate that in the past, the board has taken a position of not necessarily naming everything or outlining specific groups, because once you start down that road, you may leave out a group. So everybody has different opinions. I'm just expressing mine, that I can support this resolution, but not with whereas 9 and whereas 10. So if that remains in there, I will not be voting in favor of this resolution.
Yeah. So-
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bounds.
May I speak to Ms.
Sure.
Ms. Bounds? Ms. Bounds, I appreciate your comments. I'm trying to get back actually to our Knox County Schools webpage, but so both of those whereas statements, the second one in particular, where it says affirming Black lives, that was the point of the Juneteenth resolution, which the board approved. So this resolution is not necessarily explicitly doing that. It is talking about and communicating things, as you mentioned, that we've already done as a Board of Education and as a school system. I actually did not have a list in here in my first version, not that the board saw, but that the superintendent saw. And when I was going back and forth with the superintendent and his team, one of the things that they asked for is that we affirm some of the work that we've been trying to do in this space. So that was out of deference for him and the many years of work, the last 5 years of work that has come in this space. And so I don't think that I'm comfortable removing those two whereas statements. I do appreciate your thoughts and your opinion on that, but I don't know that anybody can deny that historical compounded trauma has affected people of color in this country. And also, it's not outside of precedent. Both our Juneteenth resolution and the resolution that was passed related to handcuffs with kids in elementary school both have similar language. So this is not the first time that this board has tackled with tough conversations in terms of the language and acknowledging some of the historical oppression and trauma of others. So I'm not comfortable removing those.
And that's okay, Mr. Watson. I totally expected that. I just don't think this is the place for it. If the superintendent wants to speak to his,
Excuse me.
if the superintendent or someone on his staff wants to speak to their asking that to be included, I think all of that work is important. And I'm very proud as a community and as a school board that we've done a lot of that. If this remains in here, you will have to correct the addition of windows and mirrors curriculum. I talked with Ms. Jackson today, and that is not a curriculum as such. I think she explained it to me that it was more of a concept, that we include literature where children can see themselves in that literature, but at least that was my understanding. It is not a curriculum and we have not adopted it.
I
So-
can certainly change that word curriculum to concept. I actually took that the addition of windows and mirrors curriculum, I took that exact language from the slide that the DEO had that referenced that. But if Shannon Jackson is saying that it's more of a concept, she's the one that brought it to the table, so I completely respect that. So I just took
And
the
you can
language
check
that I
with her, but I do know, and I'm not sure that, well, I'll just leave it there because there's a lot of other policies in place that would put parameters around the windows and mirrors concept. So, and we can take those up in policy review. But
Thank you, Ms. Bounds. And again, the purpose of this resolution isn't to define curriculum for Knox County Schools. It's simply outlining the opportunity to engage the community in a conversation around school safety and security.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Board. I appreciate Mr. Watson listening to the board last week and taking our thoughts into consideration. I personally don't think that a resolution is necessary to have community meetings, and I want these conversations, I want these meetings. I just don't think a resolution is necessary to do that. And also, I would like to request, I completely agree with what Ms. Christie said with the timeline. That is a concern for me as well. I don't think that this needs to be a rushed process. I think that all stakeholders need to come to the table, parents, students, the sheriff, the police department, everybody needs to come to the table. And so the timeline is a concern to me. So I would like to request from the superintendent that a letter be drafted asking the mayor to delay her June 12th deadline if possible. And that way we have time to come up with a thoughtful plan and really go to all 9 districts and see what every district needs. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Ms. Babb?
Yes, I'm going to sort of speak to this process too, and I spoke to this last week, that I totally support having community conversations. I think that seems to be a resounding view. This is another concern with me about this is we are about to have a major change in personnel with Knox County Schools. We have Mr. Paducas, Chief Paducas, who has been serving us, who is retiring, and we will probably soon have a new person in that position that I think needs to be very much at the table in these conversations. I think whoever that person might be, whether they're an internal person or somebody from outside, they are going to have their own thoughts and hopefully their own expertise that they will bring to the table. I want them to be a part of these conversations. And I think that that's just of utmost importance to me. I did have the opportunity to speak to Mayor Concannon today, and I'm not going to speak for her, but I do feel like she is very willing and wants to continue to work with Knox County Schools. And so I think that is just a conversation we need to have. I very much enjoyed my conversation with her, and I felt like it was very positive today. I would like to very much, I really don't support this resolution, but I very much support us meeting, as we all or I think we all talked about. I don't know that we all agreed to it. I just know I was talked to about having the meeting on May 19th. I actually would support having a facilitator. I do think it's good to have someone kind of control the conversation, not people get off sidetracked, not let one person dominate. I know I'm that kind of person that tends to overtalk. So I do think a facilitator can be helpful in that. And I would like to, from there, move on to the direction instead of right now. And I know that that's what you're kind of meaning, but you're already setting dates and things like that, that I think sometimes we're kind of talking about the same thing, but in a different way. So I would like to have I still would like to have the May 19th meeting. I just don't support this resolution. And one of the other things is we talk a lot about what has happened in other schools, but we never even mention the fact that we've had 2 school shootings here prior to what's happened this spring in our school system itself. And we never even address that that has a big effect on what's going on in our schools. So, anyway, so I also do not support the resolution, but I do want to have conversations, and I do think it needs to be a lot of people at the table. I want to hear from community members. I want to hear from our special ed teachers. I want to hear from our social workers, our principals, our parents that are affected. But I really also want that new person coming in our head of security, to really be at the table in these conversations, because I think they have to have the utmost, they're going to have to be really carrying it out and working with our partners going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Babb. Can we hear from Ms. Satterfield? Ms. Satterfield?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my ultimate goal with this resolution is to have the conversation. And so however that gets done. And I appreciate that the board is willing to have the May 19th date. I will continue to echo the sense of urgency to get some type of change and some type of solution, even if it takes school by school changes and not a whole district change, because our response that has been done since the recent shootings has not been okay. It's very triggering to our students, and so if we need to take a long process and do school by school, I support that. But I would like to see something different come August 2021, especially for District 1 schools, and that I don't know what that looks like, because we need to have a community conversation. As for the new person that'll come in, I would like to flip it on the head a little bit and say, this is what Knox County Schools, this is what Knoxville community wants to see in leadership. And so can you provide this? And I think that insight from our community might help. I don't know, I haven't hired anybody in this position, but it could possibly help Superintendent Thomas to say, who do we look for to meet these requirements? And so I understand that they do need to be at the table. And I think that we can guide who we want in that position, because that's a big position. That's a serious position, especially what has happened. And so we want to make sure that that person knows our expectations before they come in and tell us their expectations.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield. I think Mr. Watson was next, and then Ms. Christie.
So thank you. Ms. Henderson, I appreciate your comments about timing as well. Also, I just want to remind everybody, there's only 2 dates of this resolution related to timing, and that's a meeting we agreed to. And then there's a follow-up date to say, let's tell the community what we decided in terms of process. So this resolution does not recommend a specific time. The prior resolution did, and I do think there's a sense of urgency as well, in the sense of I don't think the community is going to want this process to take 2 years again. And also to that point, work tends to constrict or expand given how much time you give it. And if you tell something, if you tell a group of people the expectation is 4, 5, 6 months, that's what they'll shoot for. If you say, let's take 2 years, that's what we'll shoot for. And so I do think May 19th, when we meet, we do need to set a timetable, and I think it needs to be communicated. Out of all due respect, Ms. Babb, I really was caught off guard by you saying that you don't support the resolution when 99% of the changes that I made were the changes you asked for last week.
Excuse me.
And honestly, what I was doing in making these changes was saying, hey, I'm listening to the board in the same way I want to listen to the community. The reason I think it needs to pass in the form of a resolution and not just let's go off and do this is because we need to understand that as a board, no matter how well our intentions are, the community does not always trust us. And I'm not speaking just about community members in this room maybe tonight. I'm talking about whenever I hear the word transparent thrown around in a elected office capacity, almost nobody agrees what that means and what that looks like. So the intent of the resolution is to say to the community, we want to hear from you. We're agreeing to do that, and we're going to sign off on that we're going to do that, and it's going to look this way. Because unless we do that, then the community has nothing to hold us accountable to. What we could do, and I'm not saying we would because I don't think it's our intent, but what we could do is go back in that meeting on May 19th and set this process out, never vote on it, and just start working for the next 6 months or a year. And that is against the whole concept of the resolution. The whole resolution is to say, bring the community to the table. You cannot do that unless you effectively communicate to the community how that will work. And so that's why I think it needs to be a resolution. I know several people expressed frustration that it came in the form of a resolution, but we have very few tools as a board to bring things to the board as a whole. And I reviewed all the resolutions that we've had over the last 10 years, and many of them are very specific and handle different issues. So again, out of deference for the board and what I was hearing last week, I struck my process because the reason I did that and there was no pride in that is because I don't care about the mechanics of the process. I care about bringing the community to the table in a way that they understand and that they're valued and that we make a commitment to the community. And that's why I think the resolution needs to pass. Not because my name's on it, not because Ms. Satterfield's name's on it, but because I think we owe it to the community to say, if we're going to have a community engaged process, we're going to commit to this in writing. We're going to say, this is how we're going to do it. So again, Ms. Babb, out of all due respect, I tried to listen really well last week. And so I am a little surprised that you said you didn't like this version of it, because in some ways I thought it was your version. But again, I appreciate the dialogue, but I do think that we should tell the community how this is going to be done and be willing to say that publicly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Ms. Christie?
Yeah, and so whether we like it or not, unfortunately, just the way this has all played out, which was out of your control, I realize that. This document now seems to be an indictment on law enforcement. That seems to be how the public is interpreting it. I mean, I've heard it from parents in my district. They're very concerned. And what I would like to see, because I do think that the conversation is important to have, but like you said, no one's saying we should take law enforcement out of schools, but we need to have this conversation. What I would suggest doing is keeping the 2 meetings, but maybe even working on a resolution in the May 19th. I mean, I think if we're going to have a resolution, it needs to be one we can all support, because I think that if we aren't all supported, it's going to further divide. So my suggestion would be definitely have the conversation. I get the urgency. We can move away from a one-size-fits-all if we have to. We could go just district by district if we need to. I mean, I can completely support all these things, but my problem with this now is that I feel like you're asking, I do feel like this is an indictment on law enforcement, unfortunately. So I would rather keep the meetings but not approve the resolution at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Christie. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know there's been some talk about meetings that were prior to this MOA being adopted, but if we think back to 2019, when we discussed the MOA that's currently in effect, several of us had serious concerns that there had not been significant community input, that there had not been significant board input, that there had not been significant input from anyone. And if we look back at the way things were done leading up into 2016, what we should remember is that this district used the Delphi method quite a lot. And that method of seeking community input is a method that's specifically used to keep that input from being honestly relayed. It's a way of telling people what they think instead of finding out what people think. And that's not transparency at all. Looking at this, Mr. Watson, I was really glad to hear you use the word sign off a minute ago, because that's exactly how I read this. All this resolution does is provide some accountability to us. And if we can't sign off on a resolution saying, yes, we are willing to meet and we are willing to take community input and we are willing to actually look at this MOA honestly and openly, I think there's a serious problem there. This is accountability for us, and we need to accept accountability for actually looking at this MOA and not just signing off on what somebody else hands us.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple of things, Mr. Watson, just that concerned me a little bit. You said you didn't want to have a public forum, but yet you want to involve the community. I mean, am I missing something? Or, you know, we're talking about this May 19th date.
Mr. Watson?
Yeah, so that's right, Mr. McMillan. So at that meeting, the board has a limited amount of time. It has 2 hours is what the board has agreed to. And if that meeting is going to be facilitated by an outside group, then we don't have the luxury of having a public forum. The whole point of that meeting is to outline a process and a way to engage the public. And that certainly should happen. But I don't think in a 2-hour meeting, given the length of time our meetings have been recently, that we can hold public forum. So
I don't disagree with you on that point. I was just trying to, it's just kind of like a mixed signal. I'm going to make sure I understood what you were saying. as far as the facilitator, I'm not sure that at the May 19th meeting, we need a facilitator. Because I've been around long enough to see several of these people, not with this subject matter, but with other things that were brought in to facilitate. And some of them were good, some of them just basically anybody with a decent amount of education could have kept the conversation going. And that's literally all they did. Some of them. Now I'm talking about that, you know, sometime back. Ms. Babb, you said you'd like to have all these people involved. There's a glare. I can't see you even though I'm looking at you. Sorry. But were you talking about having them come on at May the 19th or
No.
what were you thinking
Yeah,
there?
I mean, May 19th, I mean, I will agree. I think that is us, like our group, possibly some staff people that we think could weigh in. And I do like, I will say, I do like the facilitator. I don't really have a weigh in on who it is. I do think sometimes we do need somebody to move the conversation along. I agree sometimes it needs to move me along. So, but I want the May 19th to be us, key staff people in a conversational standpoint of talking about this. That's my thought.
And that's it. No public forum, right?
I agree with no public forum for that one.
Okay. I will agree with that, thus far. However, do you really think we need a facilitator for that meeting?
Honestly, I really do think it would be. a
Well,
good idea.
why?
Why?
You and the chair, now, I'm serious, that Ms. Horn and yourself are the leadership for this board. Could we not have a meeting and you all call whoever you wish? I would think that we would get further there without a facilitator, would be my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
And honestly, I mean, Ms. Horn is the chair, so I probably would defer to her. I want us to all be part of the conversation. I guess I have been involved with things where I've seen facilitators be very positive, and I guess that you've had a mixed bag. I mean, I see them as a positive influence. So that's my only thought on it, is I see the positive way to move the conversation along.
The reason I said that is, as the vice chair,
Yeah.
the two of you make up the leadership of the board. So
I'll
I
defer
thought
to
you
Ms.
might
Horn.
maybe
I mean,
could-
I feel like this is, I think I guess my initial reaction when I heard policy review type meeting tossed around, to me, the reason we like the policy review type is because it is a little more informal. It's not the formal setting that we
That's
have
right.
here. And that's when we tend to have very good conversation and work, is in an informal conversation like that. So when I hear policy review, that's my thought. So therefore, I was not initially thinking a facilitator, because I'm thinking a more casual conversation. And I'm not sure we're going to get into the meat of, I think that our May 19th meeting is going to be about process and not necessarily about what's included in an MOA. So I don't know that, I think it's about process, which I feel like we could do.
I think you're right, and I think that's what the majority of the board desires for the May 19th meeting. Now, one other thing. And we can talk about this at the May 19th meeting, assuming we don't have a facilitator. I'd like to know more about who hires the facilitator or who appoints the facilitator. Does the board, if we're going to have one, I'm not saying we should, but if the board desires to have one, I think it should be a collective effort and not just the superintendent or the superintendent and the chair, which make up the executive committee.
Okay, thank you.
That's
Mr.
just my
McMillan.
thought.
Do you have a comment on that, Ms. Mills?
Yes, I think what Mr. McMillan is saying is what Ms. Christie actually presented at our last meeting, which is what you just reiterated, which I think the board can support. It's just at that first meeting, it being us working it through things and going from there, and not to eliminate Ms. Babb's desire to have a facilitator, but I think that needs to be part of the discussion at the May 19th meeting. And I think that's what Ms. Christie asked for originally, and kind of what I asked for when I asked you to set up that meeting. So I think we all are saying the same thing, but just that first initial meeting, no facilitator, just us working through, hearing each other out, listening really well, and moving on from there.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
We need, obviously, we need to move on here,
Mhm.
but we need to deal with we have something on the floor. We need to deal with that and then have some discussion maybe. about
Yes, and I would like to
together.
actually speak to the resolution also, if I could, before we move to Mr. Watson and Ms. Satterfield, and then we do need to wrap up our conversation, because I think then everybody would have had their say. I agree with a lot of what other board members have said. I think that I don't think a resolution like this is a way to invite our partners to the table. I just don't feel like this is an appropriate way to go about this. I feel like I'm all for having the conversation. I think we need to sit down as a group, as we've talked about, in a couple of weeks, and come up with what we want our plan to be. And a timeline and all of that. But I think a resolution may come from that, but I feel like we need to have a conversation and have a plan that we've all talked about together before we get to that point. So for that reason, I will not be supporting this resolution today. Mr. Watson and then Ms. Satterfield. Okay, Ms. Satterfield.
To the facilitation aspect, I think that a facilitator can possibly present new ideas to what a community input type session would look like that could be beneficial. But I also agree that we can be qualified board members and carry on the conversation as well too. So either way we go with that, I do think an outside facilitator can present new ideas, something different from what KCS has always done. But board chair, I want to kind of just speak to directly what you just shared. I think that is our issue with Knox County Schools, is that we're confusing who we serve. We serve people and we serve community. And so when we abide by what other bodies in our community dictate, that's how we got into this situation. Now, we don't know who runs our schools. We don't know who runs our school system, because we haven't taken the charge to say Knox County Schools runs Knox County Schools. Principals run their schools. If you look at what happened, Knox County Schools did not run Austin East on that day. And that's a problem to me. So I think that we have to set the tone.
Excuse me, I can't hear Ms. Satterfield.
I think that we have to set the tone that we run Knox County Schools, and that's what it is. And so I just want to remind us who we serve.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to just briefly recenter the students in this conversation. I think especially because of the actions of others last week, the students were not the center of the conversation. What became the center of the conversation, even to Ms. Christie's point a few minutes ago, is law enforcement became the center of the conversation. And the conversation became about, do I love police? Do I not love police? Who loves police more? And that's not the conversation that we're having. What I'm trying to have is a conversation about how to best provide the safety and security of our students. And it feels odd to me that we're nitpicking about a resolution that says we're going to have conversations when we're all saying we want to have conversations. And the idea of a facilitator, I want to be clear about this. The idea of a facilitator in this resolution is not hiring a facilitator that would facilitate this whole process from beginning to end. It's out of deference and respect to the board that when you're doing hard community work, which this will be hard, this is not a policy review discussion. This is not about what do we need to change legally in this form to make this right or whatever. This is a get down to the nitty gritty as a group of people and say, here's the best way to invite our community in this conversation. And out of respect for everybody on this board, I want each of you to be 100% engaged in that conversation. And if it's a free-for-all conversation, or if one person in this body is tasked with leading that conversation, 100% of the members here can't be involved in the conversation. That's not the way, it's an impossibility. You cannot facilitate a conversation like this and be fully involved in it. Because if you do, you bring your bias into it, which is the whole point of a facilitator. And so again, I'm a little lost, honestly, about why we're nitpicking a really stripped down version of things we've already agreed to. And I spoke to Ms. Coatney this week after I think she polled all of you all about a facilitator. And at that point, she only mentioned one who said that did not want a facilitator of the meeting. So again, I'm not sure. Again, I don't think we're centering the students in the conversation. And all I would ask is if you all agree that we should meet and lay out a process, there's nothing wrong with this resolution.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, we're, Ms. Coatney, can we have a roll call vote, please? You can start with District 9. Either way, either one.
Ms. Christie?
No.
Mr. McMillan?
No.
Ms. Bounds? Ms. Henderson? Ms. Babb? Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Ms. Satterfield?
Yes.
Ms. Horn? That's 3 yes votes and 6 no.
Okay, motion fails. Thank you, Ms. Coatney. Excuse me, order, please. Okay, excuse me, you can sign up to speak at public forum in the future. Ms. Coatney?
Item 10D, approve suspension of Knox County Board of Education Policy B200, Policy Development and Adoption, and the requirement for 2 readings of Board Policy C240 face coverings, allowing approval or denial of a revised policy on 1 reading.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Babb. Any discussion? Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Anytime we suspend our own rules, we should have a really good reason for doing that. And suspending our rules should not be the norm. It shouldn't just be our go-to when we want to get something done. Every action that we have taken on this policy, we have suspended the rules. And the only time it was really urgent was the first time we looked at the policy, when it was in August, and we were looking at putting it in place to support our principals so that they could have very clear expectations in their schools. And at that time, there wasn't time for them to be able to do that at the beginning of the year if we had moved it on to a second reading. So I object to suspending the rules because it's becoming habitual. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. Any other comments? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we have 2 opposed. Motion carries.
Item 10E, approve Knox County Board of Education Policy C-240 face coverings as amended and revisions to the 2020-2021 reopening plan consistent with the amended policy.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Fab, a second by Ms. Bounds. Discussion? Ms. Christie?
Yeah, I would
Oh,
like,
I'm sorry. You know what? We have public forum. I forgot. We have public forum. So sorry.
Okay, public forum. I think we don't need to read the policy again. Hopefully everyone understands the rules of public forum. We'll start with Sarah. Okay, we are going, because we have quite a few speakers on this topic, we are going to take a 10-minute break, and then we will get started. And just to let y'all know, we've got Sarah Wilson and then Rebecca Reeves next after that. forum speakers. We have interpreters here and they're having some trouble hearing public forum speakers, and obviously we want everyone heard. So especially at this podium down here, if you'll try to move the microphone close to you. It seemed like I think the upstairs people were a little bit clearer, but if I don't think you're clear, I might kind of stop you and let you know just so that we make sure we've got clearness on everybody. Okay, Sarah Wilson, if you will. I'm sorry, we're gonna have to wait just a few minutes, okay? But you're being very patient. We are going to get started, Ms. Wilson. Thank you for your patience. You can start, and if you will state your name, county of residence, and then the clock will start for 5 minutes.
My name is Sarah Wilson. I'm from Knox County. Let me first say that I support our officers and deeply appreciate their service in protecting our children and would never want to see them removed from our schools. I'm very grateful that the community is coming to the table to have a discussion, and I am very much in support of transparency. So speaking of transparency, let's talk about what that means for KCS. Webster's definition of transparent is free from pretense or deceit, characterized by visibility or accessibility of information. When you are transparent, you have no wrongdoings to hide. You stand in a place of integrity and accountability. Expectations are clearly represented and followed. We can talk about transparency and integrity, but when it comes to practical application, the question I want to ask you is KCS honoring this? Is KCS being transparent in their reopening plan? One of the cornerstones of the reopening plan is the metric system. Superintendent Thomas says in his reopening plan concerning the metrics that we will need your flexibility and it will be revisited continuously. These are exact quotes. This statement was to get the point across that we must ebb and flow with how the virus is acting. Last Thursday, several parents noticed that the metrics went to all green with the exception of custodial. I have that for you right here. With the exception of custodial, this very school board has said in meetings that we never have enough custodial staff, even in a normal year. Were the metrics set up that way purposely so that we were guaranteed to never go all green? I don't know. I would love to know the answer to that. This is not transparency. When parents noticed on Thursday that all the pertinent metrics were green, several emailed and called Superintendent Thomas's office. The office responded with, "We made a promise to virtual students we would follow the reopening plan." Well, by golly, you absolutely did. The problem is KCS is not understanding its own policy. The policy calls for us to follow the numbers. That's what metrics are, numbers. It is not someone else's personal, professional, or even medical opinion. It is not a guarantee to virtual students that we will not ever go green. Metrics are specific numbers you follow to make decisions. Let me ask you, what are those exact numbers? What specific numbers determine when or why we go from green to yellow? Those numbers were never provided to Knox County parents. This is not transparency. To even further point out the lack of transparency,
and dishonesty within our system, the metric system, according to KCS policy, is to be updated at 4 p.m. every day. At 4:04 on Thursday, on last Thursday, those parents called and emails began pouring in. And then guess what happened? At 10:30 a.m. the next morning, before metrics were even supposed to be updated, the metrics had magically changed. We were all of a sudden on red and yellow. How in the world did that happen in a matter of less than 18 hours? I checked the number of COVID cases. Those numbers did not change. This is not just a lack of transparency. This is dishonesty. Knox County has approximately 60,000 students. 43,000 of them have been in person this entire school year. Second semester, 7,000 of those virtual students came back in person. So are you telling every Knox County parent that the 7,000 virtual students are more valuable to you than the 43,000 that have hunkered down and fought through this all year? KCS made no promises to virtual students that we would never take our masks off or be normal again. The one and only promise that was made to all 60,000 students and their parents was that you would follow the metrics. Furthermore, this board and the superintendent now know that a Tennessee judge has made a ruling in Williamson County that school boards are not within their legal rights in Tennessee to require face coverings in school. Therefore, you are now officially put on notice that you are personally liable for knowingly using your office to create harmful policies over the people for which you have no legal authority. Therefore, I am asking someone on this board to bring forward an amendment to Ms. Babb's proposal to end the face covering policy for which you have no legal standing, effective immediately. It should not stop there. I implore someone on this board to take a stand and propose an amendment that we immediately dismiss the reopening plan due to the lack of transparency and dishonesty embedded within, and allow our children 1 week of normal to end this horrible school year on a better note. Also, in case anybody wants to know, this is the metrics for yesterday. Every one of them is green except for custodial. This is printed right off the KCS website. And also, very few parents know that these metrics are not just COVID metrics. They include all absences, whether that be from sickness, vacations, end of the year skipping, whatever that may be. It doesn't even relate to COVID completely. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Rebecca Reeves. If you will state your name and county of residence, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Reeves. I'm from Knox County. Today, I'm going to talk about two dangerous words. It's only. It's only 14 days to slow the spread. It's only a piece of cloth. It's only for your own good. It's only for your protection. It's only 14 police officers. It's only to start a conversation. It's only is a dangerous phrase that opens a door that should have never been opened in the first place. Because once opened, it's almost impossible to close. And second, many times you don't even have the authority or legal standing to open the door in the first place. And now that it's opened, we are in a real pickle. So as the doorway gets clogged, as it gets bigger and bigger, and soon there isn't a door anymore, but just a wide open space with no boundaries and borders and no control. Soon we're just free falling and making up sloppy rules as we go with no way to know how they really started or how they end. And this is where we are, a huge gaping wide open mess that started out with, well, it's only, and hiding behind the recommendations of a certain health professional who also has no authority. And now we have no way to know who can end this. I called the school and the school board back in August of 2020 pretty upset when I learned my 5- and 6-year-olds were going to be in a mask all day long, not just in the hallways as I was originally told. So they're going to have to sit distance in lunch, no hugs, and it just seemed like a really cruel and cold environment for a small child who's been home her whole life. So I send her into this cold environment with no touching, sitting spaced out at lunch, no hugs if you fall and skin your knee. Just send her off into this building I'm not even allowed into. I can't even walk down the whole sidewalk. There's 2 orange cones that reminded me of where my place is. So here you go, sweetie. Go inside, but don't touch or hug. There's going to be a bunch of people in there with just their eyes peeping out at you, but you can't see the rest of their face or their expressions. And most people look totally different without their masks on. So I called really upset, and I was assured time and time again that it was only for a little bit, it was only for just a little while, to please trust us that as the metrics change and we go green, we will relax restrictions. Yet, in the springtime, my commitment and the words that were said to me were completely trampled on because fear wins again. Why does fear always win? Because we feed it. It's not based on what's actually happening. Our COVID metrics keep going green, except for custodial, but we keep caving to a group with fear, not based on what's happening, because no children have died. The majority of the small amount of hospitalized children were hospitalized out of an abundance of caution. Only 11 adults still between the ages of 18 to 44 have died. Yet we keep caving to a group that holds the most fear. And you aren't helping anyone by caving to them, because when you do, it justifies unjust fear. And I'm very sorry for those of you who live in this intense fear, and I really am, because that's an awful way to live. But justifying fear that doesn't and shouldn't live here is crippling our county, and it's crippling our children. What do we tell someone who is drowning in a pool? Don't panic. You will make it worse. Stay calm. People become exhausted and panic and forget to float, and sometimes pull their rescuer down with them. Your panic is what is harming you. People with fear and panic are pulling you down with them, and you are letting them. We are being held hostage by fear, not by what's actually happening. Cases are down, deaths are down, vaccines are available to those who want it. Yes, they're not available to all children yet, but as Dr. Child said from East Tennessee Children's Hospital, this is not a children's disease, this is an adult's disease. So this is perceived fear and not based on what is actually happening here in Knox County. We are not New York. Some of you are going to drown in your own panic, and someone needs to look you in the eyes and say, calm down and stop. Do you all not see the private schools in our own county with no mask mandates in the classrooms, the neighboring counties with no mask mandates? Do you not see the hundreds of us at a time in indoor trampoline parks, bowling alleys, indoor amusements, all mask-free? The teenagers of Knox County are still making out in basements everywhere. Spittle and sputum is spewing everywhere. So please don't be scared of my kids' spittle or sputum. Be scared of your own health, because it has been proven that 90% of COVID cases could have been prevented with higher vitamin D levels. So maybe we need to look at your sugary drinks or fried foods or what you're eating, or maybe it's none of my business. So it's none of your business what my child's health is either. I'm tired of weakness. Someone needs to tell you to quit it. Stop making the kids responsible for your bad health choices. Take control of your own health and leave the kids alone. And I want to know who's going to be the leader to stand up and say enough. I'm only seeing the buck being passed to other departments, other leaders, I'm seeing governors, mayors, superintendents, executive teams, principals, passing the buck to each other when it comes to our children. Who out there will be the leader we need to say enough? If you won't do it, if you won't lead, then I will. Enough. Stop it now. Close the door before it gets wider with more chaos. Protect the elderly, protect yourself, and leave my kids alone. Thank you.
Sherry Garrett. Please state your name and county of residence.
My name is Sherry Garrett. I'm a citizen of Knox County. I'm a co-leader in Empowered Knox, a grassroots organization focused on making sure all Knox County citizens' constitutional rights are enforced. We are partnered with Tennessee Stands. Tennessee Stands is a nonprofit social advocacy organization working to protect the individual liberty of all Tennesseans, including our children. We are citizens demanding that our governor, county executives, and legislator restrict their authority to only that which is given to by the Tennessee Constitution. We believe our rights are given by God and secured by representative government. From where do you derive your authority to require our children to wear a medical device covering their nose and mouth? Per the FDA regulates face masks, including cloth face coverings and surgical masks, as medical devices when they are marketed for medical purposes. Medical purposes include uses related to COVID-19, such as face masks to help stop the spread of disease, surgical masks, and surgical masks with antimicrobial, antiviral agents. Face masks marketed to the general public for general non-medical purposes, such as for use in construction and other industrial applications, are not medical devices. Still, where does this school board and superintendent derive their authority to require our children to wear face coverings? It has been argued that TCA 49-2-203, Section A, Paragraph 2 gives you that authority. That states, it is the duty of the local Board of Education to manage and control all public schools established or that may be established under its jurisdiction. But does that give you blanket authority over our children? You claim you have the right to require our children to wear a medical device. You cannot give Tylenol or any medication without medical and parental consent. As most of you know, Tennessee Stands filed a lawsuit against Williamson County Schools regarding their mask mandate. While much of the case was dismissed due to standing, there is one section that Williamson County Board of Education lost. And I quote, This court is not convinced as a matter of law that Williamson County Board of Education acted within its statutory authority at the time it promulgated its face covering requirements. And the court is particularly unconvinced that Williamson County Board of Education has continuing authority to enforce its face covering requirements in light of recent policy decisions by Williamson County Mayor and Governor Lee. That includes Governor Lee's lifting the public health orders, and I would say it also includes our own mayor lifting our county mask mandate. Williamson County Board of Education's continued enforcement of face covering requirements is not viable. It further states that the courts cannot find, as a matter of law, defendants have acted within the authority given to them by the legislature when enacting face covering requirements. While you may believe that only applies to Williamson County schools, let me correct you. This ruling sets precedents in the state of Tennessee. Robertson County, Crockett County, and Alamo City schools have already lifted their mask mandates due to this ruling. And they have moved to make masking optional effective May 11th. I must demand that you all end all face covering requirements effective immediately. While I understand that what is on the table is to sunset it on May 26th, you still have no authority in Tennessee code to continue requirements for masking now or 2 weeks from now. To continue this farce will set you up for litigation in the very near future. Thank you.
Kevin Hill. Please state your name and county of residence, and you have 5 minutes.
Kevin Hill, Knox County. So I want to begin with what has just recently been posted on CNN by the radical far right-wing nut job, Dr. Fauci. I hope you feel the dripping sarcasm there. It may be time to relax indoor face mask mandates, Fauci says. So what do you all know as an administrative body that the guy I think has gotten it wrong all year doesn't know? But let's set that aside because I think there's going to be plenty of compelling speech to that issue. What I'd like to point out to you all so that you're aware of what you've been a party to is that tonight you have allowed your authority to be usurped by the PBA, and you're now currently engaged in viewpoint discrimination. I sent several of you emails stating that it was my intent, along with the PBA, I sent it to them, to come tonight and sit in the downstairs section gallery as a statement of political speech. I have a right. You, the PBA, possibly Knox County Schools, by not controlling your own meeting, have now engaged in viewpoint discrimination. The reason why I can say that is allow me to read you the response I got from the PBA regarding this issue. It's from Jane, the director of the PBA, and it basically, so I don't waste my time, I'll paraphrase. She said that this is a courthouse, and so based on that and the ruling of the Tennessee State Supreme Court that you have to use masks in courthouse facilities, that's why they're applying this to everyone. Well, as I count it right now, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and there was 6 people sitting in the downstairs gallery that are not socially distanced, and those plexiglass screens are worthless for preventing the spread of a virus through the air. Sitting in the gallery, sitting in the downstairs area without face masks. So I notified you that I was coming to engage in political speech. I told you what it was going to be, and I was barred at the door and threatened with removal from the building if I engaged in that behavior, while other people are being permitted to engage in it. As a matter of fact, all the elected officials in Knox County sat down there a week ago with the mayor shoulder to shoulder, not wearing one mask among them. And last week at the last board meeting you all had, another citizen sat in the gallery area on video without a mask on. So when they're informed I'm coming to sit there, just like you are, just like those other parties did, in the lower gallery for the purpose of political speech, they prevented and barred me access. They said coming upstairs in a separate but equal space is satisfactory. I believe there was a school board involved in such a decision in the past, and it didn't turn out well for them. It turned out well for the parties that were fighting them. I think we're facing that same reality now. So I expect you all to behave better. Take control of your own meetings. Don't let this flim-flam nonsense go on. This is a public building. If the public building authority is a private entity and you all are being led around by the nose by them in your own building, then stand up and lobby the county commission to take control of the public property in this county and not let bullies and thugs run your own meetings. Thank you.
Hillary Godsey. Please state your name, county of residence, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Hillary Godsey. I'm from Knox County. I also kind of wanted to talk about transparency tonight because I spent a lot of time on the phone with a lot of you and people in the central office, my principal, who else? There's a lot of people, a lot of hours spent on the phone. And it came down to, I remember the superintendent talking about the 72.6% of people that said they wanted to keep masks for the rest of the school year. That was the percentage that we were given. Well, then I started thinking about it and I was like, I work at these schools. I go and I serve the teachers and the principals. And every single person, I never talk to them first. They come to me. Every single person wants the mask on. And I said, I can't understand the percentage. Everybody that's coming and talking to me doesn't want the mask. I've yet to meet one person that wants it. So how are these numbers coming about? So I talked to somebody in the central office, and this is what they said. There were 650 people polled for that percentage. 472 of them said that they wanted to keep masks on. There are 10,000 employees, teachers in Knox County. That is less than 10% of them that are saying that they want the masks on. That doesn't really add up. Not only that, they said that they wanted to keep masks for summer school. Of that 650, 60% said that they wanted, of 10,000 teachers. That doesn't add up. So when you're giving us these percentages, you can't just leave the percentages. You have to give us the numbers. You have to be transparent. Now we're getting into the field day. And I know a lot of you have gotten emails about field day. It's going back to the metrics. They're all green except for one. Your custodians. It's outside. The policy, your policy says that you don't need to have masks on outside. So there's two things. You're outside, you don't have to wear a mask, you can be socially distanced, but yet parents still can't come and participate in one event. We've given up the whole year. We've been compliant, we've had grace, but our grace is running out because now you will have taken a whole entire year. It's not fair. It's not fair to the kids, it's not fair to the parents, and it's not fair to the teachers because you guys are putting this on teachers. In the central office, they didn't even know who it was that was given the authority to make us go green. I was told it was a school board that they had to vote on it from the central office. That's what they're telling parents, but it's not. I called the board members. All of them said, we don't have that authority. That's out of the superintendent's office. So if you guys can't even get on the same page, how are we supposed to be on the same page that you're on? I appreciate your time.
Chrissy Stevens. You'll state your name, county of residence, you have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Chrissy Stevens. I live in Knox County. I thought I would just start by saying I'm here so that I can tell my children that I will always fight for them. After spending hours preparing for tonight and typing out pages of notes of science and facts, I decided to trash it all. I was going to talk to you about the vote on ending the mask policy immediately in Knox County Schools, but then I decided you probably have already decided how you're going to vote. I was going to remind you that boards of health and the CDC can only make recommendations, and recommendations come with choice to follow them or not to follow them. Guidelines are not laws, and emergency use authorization does not mean approved. I was going to tell you how the COVID-19 virus has spread, citing the CDC's website, and I quote, COVID-19 is thought to spread mainly through, and maybe you didn't catch that, so let me repeat it. COVID-19 is thought to spread mainly through. So I want you to remember that word thought. The CDC thinks they know how COVID-19 is spread. You can look it up for yourself. I know that you all hide behind the CDC, many organizations do. Well, we're just doing what the CDC recommends. And did you know that members of the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices own more than 50 vaccine patents or own stock shares connected to pharmaceutical companies that manufacture vaccines. This is an obvious conflict of interest, and I mention it only because there are people, many in this room, that falsely believe that the CDC is an impartial and unbiased government entity. I'd like to now talk to the parents listening, and I hope you're listening. I believe you have the right to choose how to keep yourself and your children as healthy or as unhealthy as you want. But your children are not the property of Knox County Schools. You have the right to choose for your children if they must place a device over their faces for medical purposes or not. You have the right to choose if you consent or not to consent to your children's temperatures being taken at any time during the school day. You have the right to accept or decline contact tracing or quarantine rules. We, the people, voted for this board. And as Ms. Satterfield reminded us earlier,
Madam Chair, can you?
Sorry,
get
they
down?
serve us.
I'm sorry, yes, please don't address.
Oh, I apologize.
Board members.
I apologize. As one of the board members stated earlier, they serve us. Take your power back. In our home, we make our mental, physical, and spiritual health high priorities. We have raised all of our children to know that they are sovereign beings. We are raising them to know that they are in charge of what goes on and what goes in their bodies. My children know that they are to be considerate of others. They are to be respectful. They are to be kind and thoughtful. But ultimately, they are not responsible for anyone else's health. They are not responsible for anyone else's feelings, fears, actions, or beliefs. I will not allow my children to participate in this culture, dare I say religion, of fear that has encompassed our world over the past year. I will not allow my children to be sacrificed upon the altar for the greater good. No matter what your personal feelings are on masking, this policy should end immediately tonight. Teachers, administrators, and students should be given the choice to mask. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Elizabeth Wagner.
My name is Elizabeth Wagner. I live in Knox County. I first want to thank the school board. I want to thank you guys for listening. I want to thank you for hearing our concerns. The conversations that I've had with several of you give me hope, and I appreciate that. I have 4 children in Knox County Schools. Normally, my time during a school year would consist of 1 day a week volunteering in the school. I've made friends with several of the teachers over the 5 years that we've been here and have dedicated my Tuesdays to helping them in their classrooms. I've helped with reading comprehension, math, catching up on Mr. Late work, helping with projects, basically anything that they needed me to do. In the 2 years before the school year, I volunteered in classes where my children weren't even attending. This is how I prefer to spend my time when concerning my students, my schools, their needs, any of that, by helping those on the front lines of education. This year, parents were not allowed to volunteer. I can't imagine that this has had anything but a negative impact on the students and teachers at KCS. Parental involvement and help is vital to a school's health. At the end of this school year, I find myself spending my hours and days on a weekly and, at this point, daily basis, trying to fight the policies that Knox County Schools has imposed on our students. In the past week, I've spent hours trying to clarify the current policy that we have with the law director, the executive director of secondary education, my school board representative, our principal, our teachers at our schools. In all of those conversations, an underlying theme has emerged. There are differing views on the current school policy, even with statements made to clarify and understood by this board, such as Knox County Schools has no face covering policy regarding to outside. We still have Knox County School staff that are enforcing face coverings outside. It has been left up to interpretation, and this concerns me. We've heard conversations this past week between board members that differ on what the term recommended means. Again, this is left up to interpretation. Regarding the school COVID metrics, we've been watching for several days while the numbers stay the same or decline. On May 6th, as one of my friends pointed out, we had 6 positive COVID staff members and 17 quarantined out of 10,129 total staff members. 6. We were green in all metrics except for custodial staff, which was yellow. Not sure how it was yellow when we have 6 positive staff members. On May 7th, we still had 6 COVID positive and 17 quarantined. And yet we moved to yellow for staff attendance and red for custodial support. How is there 0 change in COVID numbers and yet the color changes? Are we including staff that have requested days off in the COVID metrics? If a teacher is out of school because she has to take her son to an eye appointment, will that force us to go to yellow? I've spent time and effort trying to understand how these metrics work, and I have yet to find a clear answer after hours of work. It seems the metrics as well are left up to interpretation. So what's the purpose? In the reopening plan last year, it was stated that when we reach green, the masks would be removed, normal in-school activities would commence. Is it the board and superintendent's stance that because we don't have enough custodial staff hired, we're forced to stay in yellow status independent of COVID cases? Or is it, again, left up to interpretation? I received an email this week stating that KCS has made a commitment to our parents of virtual students who return to school in January. That was a quote, as an answer to the reason why I cannot attend my 5th graders award ceremony or his field day. There are 60,000 students in Knox County Schools, and currently 50,000 of them are in person. Approximately 7,000 students of the in-person students return this January. So why would the commitment made to 14% of in-person students override the commitment made to 86% of students that have been there all year? What I'm asking the board for tonight is clear and overwhelmingly obvious guidelines that are understood by every single KCS board member, principal, staff member, teacher, parent, anybody that wants to know. My pastor often says you can either make a point or make a difference, and rarely do you get to do both. I'm not here tonight to make a point. I'm here tonight to try to make a difference in our school system, and I believe that's what each and every one of you really want. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting there. I want to thank the Knox County School Board, because without this interruption in my regular routine, I would still be volunteering in classrooms. However, since this is not an option, I will now be spending my time fighting for the rights of our students, not just mine, all KCS students. I believe our students should have a right to protection by having a police presence in their schools and not just the ones outside the city limits. I believe our students and their parents should have a right to choose which medical devices or interventions they deem necessary, including face coverings. I believe our students should have clear policies that they and the whole county can clearly understand, and I believe that face masks are just the beginning for me. I'm awake now, and I'm aware of our school system, and I will do everything in my power to work with you to make KCS the best it can be for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah Stafford. Please state your name and county of residence, and you have 5 minutes.
Deborah Stafford, Powell, Tennessee. Thank you so much for having me. Like others, I had one speech planned, and after listening to everyone downstairs, I'm going to go a completely different direction. And I got to take a deep breath. Like many people, I'm here to ask to please end the masking immediately. I sent you all an email and explained that good research is showing that children under 10 are extremely unlikely to contract or spread COVID due to not having enough ACE2 receptors. And research is showing that COVID spike protein plugs into ACE2 receptors, and children do not have enough in the epithelial lining of the nasal passages to get it, much less spread it. Dr. Childs had presented to you the one exception is morbidly obese children. That is because adipose tissue has ACE2 receptors. With each decade of life, the ACE2 receptors in the epithelial tissue progressively increases. However, there's now been several studies that track the rare children who do contract or test positive, and we know that many times a positive test can be a false positive, which is also called asymptomatic positive. Those children do not spread to other people. Therefore, masking does not make sense. In adults, you now have access to the vaccine. If you've been vaccinated, why are you scared? That said, I'm going to talk about all of the IEP issues and the special needs issues. I have a 21-year-old who was grossly failed by Knox County Schools. She has autism. She has vaccine-induced autism. By the way, vaccine-injured lives matter. She quit school because she was bullied repeatedly by Knox County Schools. She was told by faculty at Knox County Schools, Allie can't do math. Allie can't do math. Guess what? Allie's doing algebra and Allie's doing geometry now at home. Because guess what? Lo and behold, Allie can do math. I had to beg for a functional behavior assessment because not every child gets a functional behavior assessment. Only the parents that complain and raise Cain get functional behavior assessments. Then when we parents get functional behavior assessments and we get functional behavior plans, it's hit or miss whether the functional behavior plans get followed, right, Sherry Howlett? And then if the functional behavior plans get followed, functional behavior plans do not get shared with people throughout the school. So if a child acts up with the lunch lady has no idea what to do because she has no idea that the functional behavior plan exists. So if you have an officer and you see a child with a problem behavior, chances are they have no idea a functional behavior plan exists. Now, my anger and rage with my child's illness and what happened to her led me to go back to school to become a nurse practitioner. I am now a member of the Foundation for Children with Neuroimmune Disorders. I am now the only practicing Medical Academy of Pediatric Special Needs provider in training in East Tennessee. I receive a number of requests from Knox County Schools to sign orders for PTOT and speech language therapy. I receive blank orders from Knox County Schools that says, per the IEP. I receive no IEP. Well, how do I know what I'm signing? I have repeatedly asked Knox County Schools to please include the IEP. I never get the IEP. I will not sign those orders because I don't know what I'm signing for. I have been told for years that Knox County Schools under-identifies children with mild behavior issues because you all don't want an audit from the Fed. This is what I've been told. Whether or not it's true, I do not know the answer, is that years ago, the Fed said we have a certain percentage of children in this nation that have neurodevelopmental disorders. Neurodevelopmental disorders over the last 2 decades have skyrocketed in the United States, and that percentage has never changed. And that if Knox County Schools over-identifies students, the Fed will swoop in and do an audit, and Knox County Schools does not want to do an audit. Again, whether or not that's fact or fiction, I do not know the answer to that. But when I hear all of this talk about special needs students and functional behavior plans, it's crap, because it doesn't happen in many schools. If you have a principal that's supportive of special needs kids tend to get what they need. If you have a principal that doesn't give a crap about special needs kids are treated like crap. Am I right, Sherry Howlett? And to say that when children are bringing loaded guns to school, we don't need police just seems crazy to me. If we had police guarding entrances of exits, when I worked at Applebee's in 1994 and we had alarms if people went out the fire exit, seems to me that would have saved a lot. Thank you very much.
Naomi Elliott. Please state your name and county of residence, and you have 5 minutes.
Naomi Elliott, Knox County. First of all, thank you to all of the police officers and especially the school resource officers who sacrifice so much to protect and serve. To officers, students, staff members, families, and other members of the community who have been affected by senseless violence, I'm praying for you. May God give you comfort and peace. It would be nice to live in a utopia where there is no violence, only world peace. It would be nice to live in a more equitable world where we realize what it is truly like to equally cohabit this world.
Okay, excuse me, you have signed up to speak about face masks, so.
I am.
Okay.
This is my belief about this issue. Thank you. A world where all humans are treated fairly would be nice. A world with less greed and more equality would alleviate so much needless pain and suffering. We would do good to lessen the wealth gap and restore power to the people. We would do good to reduce educational disparities. These things have direct correlations with the crime rates. Each human being is equally important, yet we are all unique. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to public policy and school policy. We must make sure that all members of society are treated fairly according to their beliefs. Our forefathers knew what it was like to escape tyranny. They had a wisdom to know that history repeats itself. In writing the documents that founded our great nation and to defend our rights and our liberties, they knew that eventually we would be tested and tried by having our freedoms attacked, especially by the stroke of a pen. Now stop attacking our freedoms. Our rights shall not be abridged. We do not give you consent to conduct research experiments on us, and especially not our children. It is ridiculous that we are having to take time off of work and away from our lives yet again because Knox County School Board continues to usurp authority that does not belong to them in the first place. Power to the people. As far as I'm aware, none of you on this board are licensed to practice medicine in the state of Tennessee. And according to the FDA, masks are medical devices. You can be investigated for violating those regulations. And not only that, you're putting your teachers and principals and other staff members at schools at risk of being prosecuted under the color of law. Because when a member of government acting in official capacity cannot infringe upon the rights of citizens, or they can be fined and imprisoned. Even nurses who want to help administer the COVID vaccination have to get their license reinstated or renewed. There is a streamlined process for that. I don't know why you think that you are above all these laws and regulations meant to protect the people when everyone else has to abide by them. All the other counties are dropping their mandates fast, yet Knox County seems to want to prolong the suffering by not eliminating the mandate effective immediately. We were made to be free. We were made to smile. We were made to connect. All of these things help to make everyone healthy and happy individuals, families, and communities. This issue should not be driven based on popularity, as the laws meant to guide us are clear. You do not have the authority that you falsely claim that you have. Abolish the mask mandate. Let us be free. If you want to take action to improve the health of students and staff, end the mandates without delay, and let us breathe. Let us breathe freely. Let us have proper airflow. There are other actions that you can also take to improve the health of staff and students. Don't just opt for ergonomical chairs. Invest the money and go all out to provide balance ball chairs for all who want them in Knox County Schools. Provide healthier choices in the cafeterias and stop serving so much unhealthy processed food. There's healthy activities that children can do. Provide more extracurricular activities and make sure that all children have those opportunities, no matter what their socioeconomical background is. End the mandates. Thank you.
Steve Elliott. Steve Elliott? Okay. Isabella Elliott. Please state your name and county of residence, and you have 5 minutes.
Isabella, Knoxville. To whom it may consider, me and my friend are trying to make a difference in wearing masks in public. I am 10 and my friend is 9. We also go to Rita Elementary School. We think that masks should be completely optional because there are many people who have medical issues or other things. And it also may make it hard to breathe, and also some people's religions does not support masks or think that they are needed and in the Constitution are needed. Wait, no. It says you have the right to have any religion in my school. Freedom of religion in my school have been over 2 people who have a B in overall behavior just because they get a lot of marks for having their mask under their nose. And they have hardly did anything other than that also at my school. A rule is to wash your hands at every bathroom break, even if you don't use the bathroom. And even though they don't say anything when you don't, but your mask if under your nose, get it and then you get in trouble. Next, CDC says that if it is hard to breathe in your mask, you have the right to take it off. Overall of this, my point is that if you're old enough, you should pick if you want to wear a mask or not. And if you still are young, your caregiver should tell you if you should wear a mask or not. CDC info. Actually, never mind. Hello to whoever is reading this. I would like to thank you for reading this. I hope you will bring this to awareness for other people. From me and my friend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lisa Fontarosa, and she has 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
Lisa Fontana Rosa, Knox County. I want to let you know my expectations as a parent of a Knox County student. I expect complete normalcy for our children next year. No more moving goalposts. Governor Lee's order that delegated authority to mayors and other leaders to mandate face masks and other measures was purposely to expire. He's opened the state up. Mayor Jacobs followed and has ended the mask mandate in Knox County as of April 27th. We followed these mandates despite there being real questions as to whether the board ever had the authority to impose them. In fact, at least one trial judge in Williamson County Chancery Court seriously questioned whether the county school board ever had the authority to mandate face masks for students. In a case in which parents challenged the school board's mandate, the judge wrote that if the Tennessee Court of Appeals chose to review the parents' case, he found real issues of fact as to whether the school board exceeded its limited authority to impose such a mandate, much less to impose punishment for violating the mandate. The Court of Appeals did not hear that case, but they will likely hear one soon. There's no need to involve courts. There's no need for the mandate now. Those who choose to continue to wear a mask can do so. Vaccines are available to all who desire to take them. We know our children, vaccinated or not, are the least vulnerable to the virus, but they are vulnerable to the effects of unnecessarily continuing with excessive COVID measures. Due to excessive quarantines, COVID protocol, and contact tracing since March of 2020, our children have lost out on so much socialization, which is critically important to child development. There is simply no good reason we cannot return to normal. Children are our most precious resource. There are no do-overs. I personally feel that I have been misled this year. I now have distrust with Knox County Schools administration and some on this board. I demand transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley Higgins. Please state your name and county of residence, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Shelley Higgins, and I'm a resident of Knox County. 8.5 days. That's what we have left in the 2021 school year. 8.5 days. And when I think about all of the time that has been spent repeatedly in an attempt to repeal a motion that was set back in September, and all the things that we could be doing with that time instead, I'm sad. There are things that we need to be focusing on besides this. And honestly, no matter what anybody here personal or political view is, on masks, the Board of Education for Knox County set a policy back in September of 2020. And that policy said that the mask mandate would sunset in August. The reason that I believe that it's important and critical that you keep this simply has to do with trust. There are parents who made decisions for their children to attend school this summer based on that information. A lot of those parents are parents of medically fragile children. The fact that it is too late now, if anybody here, let's say that Knox County decides to, yeah, we're just going to let this sunset on the last day of school on the 25th of May, it's still too late to send your kids to the summer program unless you had already signed up. So really, all that we're asking here is just for you to honor the policy that you set. And looking back over the minutes, even in September from 2020, I even have it down that Ms. Horn actually said that she had heard from parents, teachers, and principals as well, and that most were positive about having a mask policy in place. She felt the policy needed to be clear about when a mask should be worn and when it was permissible not to be worn. So why is this on the agenda again? You made a policy. We're almost finished. There's 8.5 days to go. I think about all the time that has been spent because almost every meeting, this has come back up to repeal a policy that was set. And I think about all the other things that could have been done. And I actually had in my notes tonight, discussing Mr. Watson and Ms. Satterfield's proposal, all of the community input, all of that time that we could be using for that. And it's gone, at least for this school year. I looked back over legislation that the state of Tennessee passed or discussed with regard to public schools. We didn't talk about that. And even just to give you a little bit, we had education, we had training on the detection, intervention, prevention, and treatment of human trafficking victims with regard to students. Tennessee Accommodations for All Children's Act, the mediation process for public records custodians and student records, media and publishing, confidential records of minors, Textbook Transparency Act, grants, Teachers Discipline Acts. I could go on. And all of this time has been spent hashing out and rehashing a policy that was decided. 8.5 days. Hold what you said, no matter what you think. Personally, don't let the politics get in the way on this. These families have made these decisions. They're counting on your word meaning something, and that's why you're here. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlie Dorsett, and he has 3 minutes and 20 seconds.
Charlie Dorsett, and I live in Knox County. Most people at my school this year have been doing very well with the mask requirements, and we have found ways to enjoy the school year, even adjustments that have had to be made because of the COVID pandemic. We have found ways around the requirements and the COVID precautions that schools are taking. We have done very well. And I personally as well have been able to enjoy the school year with all the safety precautions. It has still been very enjoyable for me and for other people, teachers as well. I can only speak for myself, but a lot of my teachers have said that they've been able to enjoy the school year as well as they have last year with masks. Now, it's been hard on everyone. There may have been ways that teachers have had to cope, ways that students have had to cope, but we've still been able to get through it. We have only 8.5 days left in the school year. Many people that I've talked to, including myself, believe that it's important to keep wearing masks for the rest of the school year. Masks work best when everybody wears them, not when just a selected amount of people do. I urge the board to keep the promise originally made to sunset the policy on August 1st, and then follow the local health and safety guidelines at the beginning of next school year. I don't like wearing a mask. It feels very restricting, but I wear it not just for my safety, but for the safety of people around me as well. I hope that we don't have to wear them next year, but only time will tell, and there's no way of knowing what cases are going to look like. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Tanya Coates.
Thank you, School Board. I was not going to talk this evening. Tanya Coates, Knox County. I wasn't going to talk this evening. However, as we're thinking about the next couple of days, the 8 days that we have left in school, I know that this is not a topic that you would want to continue to do, but as educators in Knox County, we feel like we've done the Muhammad Ali of the okey doke of trying to lean back and take the punches. But we cannot continue to be in this fight and knowing that other things are going on around us. Just as yesterday and this past week on Monday, that the Senate House Bill 623 and House Bill 508 about the race theory bill that is going to jeopardize your schools next year. I'd hope that you would look into that and about the policies about what educators have to teach, because you as a district will be penalized.
Hey, Ms. Coates, we need to stick with face masks right now.
I'm sticking with it.
Okay.
It's talking about how it's all coming together.
Okay, sorry.
How this can affect us, as just some of our last two speakers spoke about, how these changes we have allowed face masks to dictate what you're doing here in the district. That was just one policy in regards to in regards to what you're doing in the district. But we're asking you in regards to face mask and reopening, these are ever changing. We're asking that you also continue to give the authority to the superintendent and his administration to do what's best for students, as he has done for this last 200 days of school. We have spent all of our time in Knox County Schools this year, less 5 days, with a policy that has worked well. We have made sure that kids were safe, and educators having to take on on custodial duties. We have taken on duties of making sure that kids are showing up to school. But when it comes to, we cannot allow, or we're asking you not to allow, to be bullied by just because it's where we don't want kids to not get friends. Our kids are resilient. They have made friends this year, more than probably what I've made this year. But we're asking that masks should not dictate one of your policies that you have that causes dissension in this district. Again, I thank you for what you have approved last August. You revisited in September. But as of today, we have spent nearly over 15 hours over one policy, that other policies have been on the wayside. And we're just asking you to reconsider that. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public forum on the face mask.
Thank you, Ms. Webb. Okay, comments, questions? Mr. Watson.
Can somebody repeat the motion that's on the floor for me? I had stepped out to use the restroom when it was made. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Courtney.
Yes, the motion on the floor is to approve the amendment to policy C-240 and the revisions to the 2020-2021 reopening plan consistent with the amended policy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Courtney. Ms. Christie?
Yeah, I would like to amend Make a motion to amend the policy to just say the face mask requirement will end on Wednesday, May 26th, and just end it there.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay, so Ms. Christie is offering a substitute motion, and Ms. Henderson, did you second that? Okay. Ms. Bounds? I can't hear you.
I was just going to wait since that was a substitute motion, but I don't know, you can stop me if this is not relevant. But I did have a clarification that I wanted to address because last month I asked quite a these people keep saying we promised, and I had no answer, but now I think I understand a little better with the email that went out from our elementary supervisor that stated, however, Knox County Schools has not moved to green as a district at this time, and we have made a commitment to our parents of virtual students who returned to our school in January that we would follow our reopening plan through the end of the school year. I would just like some explanation from the superintendent, the elementary supervisor, someone in Knox County that it can explain to me, because I don't remember voting on this commitment to the virtual students as a board member. I don't remember this ever being discussed. So I don't know how this promise was made to the virtual students. So I'd just like some clarification because we've heard both sides believe the promise was made or the metrics were supposed to be looked at. So how did this happen? Who wants to answer?
In terms of the reopening plan, when it was approved, it was for the school year. So I don't know that any promise. Where does it say promise?
That was in the email from the elementary supervisor. It was a promise. It was a commitment to our parents of virtual students who returned to school in January that we would follow our reopening plan through the end of the school year. And I think some of the problem is that respectfully, Mr. Superintendent Thomas, is that, and I understood, maybe other members of the board thought differently, but I understood that the metrics weighed very heavily on what we would do. And I also remember it being talk of a fluid as we saw what developed with the virus. But now we pretty much have learned that the metrics were only a small part of that. And it has more to do with consultation with the health department and others. So I don't know. It concerns me that, I don't know. I just don't think, I guess that was a part of the reopening plan. I just didn't understand the reopening plan the way evidently it was interpreted by the staff and the superintendent. So.
Thank you, Ms. Bounds. Ms. Owen?
Let Mr. Watson go first.
Well, there were several people in front of before
Okay.
him.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I wanted to note just a few things, and I'll ask Mr. Dubler to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this first part that I'm about to say. First, Williamson County Schools, I'd like to be sure everyone understands, they are still following their mask mandates. There has been no court ruling saying that they cannot follow their mask mandates. They sent out email clarification, and their mask mandate is still in place. That the judge was not convinced regarding the board's authority, that didn't have anything to do with a court ruling. It was simply a note. It was not a finding in a trial. There hasn't been a court ruling regarding face mask use in schools in Tennessee. What is referenced is a motion to dismiss, which was filed by the defendant, which is Williamson County Schools. They filed a motion to dismiss, and the majority of that motion to dismiss was upheld. So it's not that Williamson County lost a case, it's that they won their motion to dismiss. So it's really the opposite of what is being presented to us. And the fact that their mask mandate is still in place should be fairly significant to us. The requests that I'm hearing tonight are to end this policy immediately, and that's not at all what's on our agenda for consideration. what we are considering is whether to sunset this policy 2 months earlier than the August 1st date that we had already agreed to. Our summer programs are what will be affected by this. And we really need to think about the fact that if we change this policy for our summer programs, we are changing the policy for the one group that made a choice to come with that mandate in place, because that's what they were told. And if I could ask Mr. Reiswick to, Dr. Reiswick, I'm sorry, to answer a couple of questions for me. Can you tell me how many students we have signed up for summer?
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Reiswick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Owens. I think our number was 5,850 when the window closed.
Okay, and okay, so the window is closed. So even if we changed our policy tonight, people that would have impacted, they can't sign up, right? So if someone did not choose summer because of the mask mandate, they can't change their mind and sign up now.
The state law for, or not, excuse me, not state law, but the state requirements around the summer schools required a 30-day window for that application process, and that window closed on April 20th. So at that point, those were the numbers we used to base building out the summer programs and staffing, and are set to start that on June the 1st. So there's no additional window at this point planned to be open for that.
Okay, thank you. So, Madam Chair, my understanding here is that we're not helping anyone by changing this. If we move it to May 26th, we're impacting people who chose to come to summer school knowing that there was a mask requirement in place. We're not helping anyone because people who don't want that mask mandate can't sign up now. It's too late. Over and over, we hear that communication is a problem, and we are part of that communication problem. We are a huge part of that communication problem, because month after month after month, we're telling people that we're talking about changing the policy. And that shouldn't be happening. When we've made a decision, we should be able to stick by our decision. Month after month after month, our integrity is being called into question, and our community is distrusting us more and more because we're telling them, oh no, we're going to go back and talk about it again. We need to be able to make a decision. If it requires 2 readings, we should be able to take 2 readings. If there's an emergency situation, we can make an adjustment. But to make a decision and then bring it back again and again and again and again with little tiny tweaks in the hopes that it is somehow going to be a different outcome, that's just not fair to the public. It doesn't cause them to trust us, and it doesn't feel like we have integrity there. I know that our administration took a poll of our principals a while back, and if I remember correctly, 75% wanted to keep it in place. Why are we working so hard against our school administrators? It doesn't make sense to me. The CDC recommendations have not changed. Nothing there has changed. They still recommend a face covering worn correctly. They do not recommend a medical device because face covering is not a medical device. That also needs to be pointed out. It is very clearly stated that it is not a medical device. I've tried to find a reason, some kind of motivation that this policy would come back again and again and again, and I can't find one. The only reason that I could begin to find is that there's some kind of political statement, and we shouldn't be here making a political statement. We should be here doing what is right for our students. And to continually go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth is not right for our families. It's not right for our students. It's not fair to the community. And it just needs to end. We voted for a sunset date, and we need to have the integrity to stick by it.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. Ms. Christie?
Just to go back and to address some of the things that Ms. Owen said. And first of all, I have always seen vaccine availability as being an endpoint to this. I mean, as most of you all know, I have a child in the hospital today. I've walked by the vaccine clinic at UT more than once. Those people are bored out of their minds. No one is in there. I was walking through Walmart last week, and they were announcing overhead that, you know, we have vaccines in the pharmacy right now if you can come up and get them. I mean, at some point, we have to start talking about an exit strategy. You know, by this time, I mean, by August, you know, pretty much anyone who wants a vaccine, 7th grade and up, will have had an opportunity to have gotten one. So, I mean, I do think that a lot's changed and that has to be taken into consideration. So I would definitely support just ending on the 26th, finishing out the school year. And I do think we need to talk about, as Ms. Bounds said last month, what we're going to do in August. You know, and readdress that maybe next month.
Thank you, Ms. Christie. Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I have just a couple of questions before we get around to voting on this. One, in regard to outdoor activities, field day for elementary and the like, I guess field days is a big activity. Are they allowed for parents to attend at this point or not?
I think the communication that went out was that what we had in the reopening plan, that parents would not attend.
Why?
It's
an outdoor activity.
Well, it's an outdoor activity, but that was just what was in the reopening plan that was approved by the board. So that's what we try to stick with.
Well, okay. Let me. I don't mean to be bitter with you, Bob, but there are an awful lot of parents that want to go. It's my understanding at some schools they've been told that they could. So there's a lack of consistency. And at this point, if it's an outdoor activity, I don't care if they have to go through the building in order to get outside. I don't understand why they shouldn't be allowed to do that.
We surveyed the principals. The recommendation from principals was, hey, let's follow the policy that we have until the end of the school year. And
all right,
that's what we supported. And the inconsistency, we can deal with that on a case-by-case basis.
Well, will you deal with it firmly?
Yes, sir.
I'm talking about firmly. I'm not talking about just don't do it anymore. I mean, if we're going to make rules and then just let administrators do whatever they want to on their own because they happen to be the administrator of a given school, then, you know, I think the public will get down on us pretty quick, and they probably should, to be honest. Now,
Excuse me, we can't hear the speaker.
Now, something else that at this point, I guess I want to ask is, I know the 26th is before us, and we've heard 2 or 3 people talk against it. And there's some people that don't really care, I'm sure, one way or the other. But if we were to lift it any earlier than the 26th, would there be any support for that or not? Does it have to be the 26th or nothing?
Anybody want to weigh in on that? Ms. Bab?
I have talked to all the principals in my district, and I know you don't care, obviously, but I respect them, that they feel like they have put processes in place to get through the school year, and I respect that. I can support ending it on the 26th, but I will not support ending it before the 26th.
Okay, let me ask you, since you,
That you just wanted to know, and that's my
well,
answer.
well,
Okay, Mike?
I want to know something else. Since you have so much contact, what are your principals doing about field day in the elementary? Or do
Since
they
I
have
got
one?
blessed out by one of the parents of one of the schools, I'm pretty sure.
Sometimes, I don't disrespect or mean to imply that I disrespect principals. They do a great job and it's a tough job, but just because they feel a given way, they're appointed of that school. We are elected to carry on all the schools. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Especially because I was not on the board when some of these decisions were originally made, I felt like it was important to kind of go back and kind of look at the evolution of the conversation, because the conversation has continued. And so just briefly, on July 15th, the reopening plan was approved 9-0, and that kicked off the window for parents to make a decision related virtual instruction between July 15th and 22nd. I would assume the reason it was approved on July 15th is so parents could make that decision. And then on August 12th, approval 8-1, policy C-240 was put into place to provide more clarity about the implementation of face coverings in schools. And then I'm assuming that was approved on August the 12th because August the 24th, school was going to start, and that was an important decision to make prior to school starting. The next window of time that we had was between October 26th and November 6th for spring 2021. And on November 11th and December 9th, we had discussions on contact tracing and mask predominantly. And then on February 10th, we had a regular meeting. Item 6H was to discuss the issue again with possible action. There was no action that came that night. On March 3rd, then we had the report on the Colorado study, and then we had another window of time, March 3rd through April the 20th, for people to make decisions about summer school. And as Dr. Reisman pointed out earlier, we had 5,850 sign up. The other thing that I asked, because I was curious about this, is how many students that have been virtual signed up for summer school. 17% of our students in summer school have been in virtual school this semester. That's roughly 1,000 students. There's also no virtual option for summer school. Is that true, Dr. Reiswick? And so those students who have been virtual have made that choice to go to summer school, and I would assume that's because virtual for some of them maybe has been difficult. And so they've opted to get this additional support that we've committed to. And then on April 7th, we had discussion again on policy C-240. And then on April 14th, we had discussion and possible action. And we took action that night, in fact. So the first action that we took was a vote 5-4, and that was to approve Superintendent Thomas's plan for 21-22. And I know the thing that I elevated that night, and the thing I've really been trying to elevate since the beginning of these conversations, is that the public needs to know from this body who it's going to look to for guidance related to COVID-19. And we've heard over all these discussions, lots of different people being elevated about, but they're saying this, or they're saying that. And none of us are medical professionals in the sense of acting on this board. And so we need to give the public that information. And in that plan, it says that we're going to follow the Tennessee Department of Health recommendations related to COVID-19. And I've said many times to people who have asked me, whatever they say, I'm down with it. I voted 5-4 for that to be put in place. We also that same night voted 8-1 to sunset pause the first or second reading. And the reason we did that, I believe, being in that discussion, is because we thought it was really important to make a final decision that night. And so 8-1, we approved to not have second reading on the mask policy C-240. And immediately following that, 9-0, this board approved that it would sunset on August 1st. So then April 20, and we had discussions that night about what happens when the governor does his thing on April 28th, whatever he may do. And on the 27th, Governor Lee passed Executive Order 80. Mayor Jenkins ended the mask mandate in Knox County. We then had a subsequent emergency or special called meeting on April 30th. That agenda was not approved, and we didn't have discussion about the item then. I know I didn't approve the agenda that morning because, from my understanding from the law department, from Mr. Dupler, is the decision that we made prior. There was nothing that the governor or the mayor did that circumvented that decision. And then on May 5th, last week, we had more conversation about possibly sunsetting. And now on May 11th, we all got emails about the Citizens for Limited Government versus Golden and WCBOE that actually occurred on April the 30th. And now we are discussing this one more time. I want to point the attention to the board of policy B-112. Policy B-112 talks about the duties of board members. There's not many, there's only about 8, I think. But number 6 says to accept the will of the majority vote in all cases and give support to the resulting action. I've done that on this board, and I've seen this board do that in a lot of circumstances. This has been the exception. Mr. Dupler, if you can tell me tonight that something has changed that makes the decision we made on April 14th moot, then I will vote for another decision. But unless that occurs, I will pass on all votes related to our mask policy or COVID guidelines, because I think as an elected official, the public needs to be able to trust us. And when we act as a board, no matter what the decision is, I think we need to, in good faith, live out that decision until the circumstances change. And I've not yet heard at this point that the circumstances have changed, although we got really good news today that it sounds like we're going to be able to get vaccines for 12 to 15-year-olds promptly. So I'm excited about that. So Mr. Dupler, is there anything that has happened that has made our decision on April the 14th moot from a legal standpoint?
Mr. Dupler, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Watson. I mean, that's not an easy question to tackle because
I don't want to give you easy questions.
Yeah, because things have happened and things have happened recently. But your question is, has there been a legal mandate, as I understand it? I mean, has there been something from a judge, something from from the governor, something from Tennessee Health Department, something like that, saying that schools must remove masks? There has not been that, but there has been what I would call considerations for this board to look at, and that would be what's been talked about, which is both in public forum and this board, which is the governor's latest executive order, the mayor's proclamation, and this case. Although it's not binding, it's a Williamson County case. It was dismissed. I mean, what Ms. Owen said was true. The time for appeal has not lapsed yet. It doesn't lapse until the end of the month. So not saying that it couldn't be appealed, but it didn't come from a Knox County judge, so it's not binding at all on this board. But these are considerations. That's the way the law department would describe it.
So yes, there's certainly been things that have happened, and lots of people have made different decisions related to decisions outside of Knox County Schools directly. So, but in your legal opinion, if the board were to let its decision stand that it made on August 14th related to following the Tennessee Department of Health for 21-22 and sunsetting the mask policy on August 1st, are we acting outside of our scope legally?
There's nothing legally at this point to restrict the board from doing that or from changing the policy.
Thank you.
Either way.
So as I outlined to the board just a few minutes ago, in good faith, we've had many, many conversations about this. And we have listened to public forum speakers. I actually went back because I was kind of curious how many total unique speakers we've had, because we've certainly had some repeat guests who have, passionately spoke to this issue. And in that time, since November 11th, we've had 40 unique speakers. So we've had 40 unique speakers in good faith. We've heard them out. We got to the place after many times on the agenda, it's saying discussion and possible action. We got to a place of action on April 14th. And I will be following our policy B112 and accepting the will of the majority of the board that night, and I will be passing on the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Ms. Henderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Board. I just think when you have policies during a pandemic, you have to be flexible, and waiting 2 extra months is not being flexible. And as Ms. Christie said, the vaccine is available to the majority of people. That should be the end game. And it's the right time to visit this because of the governor's decision, the mayor's decision. Our COVID-related metrics are in green. So I just think it is the right time to revisit this policy.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Yeah, I think you bring up a good point just about the metrics, because if you actually go by our metrics, one would reasonably think that we would be in green. So for that reason, it seems that if we were in green, we wouldn't have masks anyway. So I don't know whose light was on first. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to remind some of the folks who were present at the time of a policy review meeting that happened not this past February, but the February before, where there was some very impassioned feeling about sticking with a decision that had been made by this board. Thank you.
Mr. Watson?
I just want it to be noted that my statements are not about us following what we said we're going to do with fidelity. 100%, we need to do what we said with fidelity. And so if our plan states that green, then masks aren't going to be used, that's what we need to do. My statement is more about this particular policy, and the policy came out of the plan, which means, in my mind, that the plan should be followed as designed. We also know, as many people have discussed tonight, that's not always done with efficacy and fidelity. Us dropping this policy is not going to make all of that change. We are still going to have issues with the way different policies and different things get implemented in our schools. Again, I just think that the board has acted on this issue, and I will be.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Ms. Babb?
I'd like to call for the question.
Okay. Without objection, Ms. Coatney, if you'll do a roll call vote, please.
And can we be clear what we're voting on?
Yes. Can you restate the motion, please?
I believe Ms. Christie's substitute motion was to approve the policy as amended by changing the sunset date to May the 26th, 2021, and Ms. Henderson seconded that motion.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Coatney.
Point of clarification, does that leave us with no plan during summer?
Mr. Dupler, that
it doesn't,
assuming that would.
So
that
there's
would
no
sunset the
language there.
policy, there wouldn't be a face coverings policy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Owen. So as I understand it, the superintendent has a plan for the fall, and that was voted on. So if you sunset the policy, then that would what Ms. Owen says would be correct, then there would not be any, no policy nor plan in effect for the summer.
Thank you, Mr. Dupler.
Ms. Satterfield?
No.
Ms. Owen?
No.
Mr. Watson?
Pass.
Ms. Babb?
Yes.
Ms. Henderson?
Yes.
Ms. Bounds?
Yes.
Mr. McMillan?
Yes.
Ms. Christie?
Yes.
Ms. Horn?
Yes.
That's 6 yes votes and 3 no votes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Was it two or was it pass?
Two nay votes and one pass.
One pass. I just want clarification.
And
So in the agenda, maybe I'm just missing something. And again, I did step out for a minute. Was that first reading or did we suspend for second reading?
we did, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I think we have a public forum speaker, Ms. Babb.
Yes, and we thank you very patiently for waiting. Lauren Seagrove. Grave. Please state your name and county of residence, and you have 5 minutes to speak.
My name is Loren Seagrave, and I live in Knox County. I am a senior at Austin East, and I am in the top 10 with a 4.1 GPA. I have won first in multiple state acting competitions hosted by Thistle and qualified for nationals held by NSDA. I'm saying this to make sure you listen. After I was told by someone close to me that it would be near impossible for you to change your opinion on mandatory searches at Austin East, I decided that this speech isn't about that one thing. It's about the decisions you make for Austin East in the future. I didn't know what to say the first day I saw officers swarming my school. We came back after what happened at Austin East. I was unbelievably hurt, and the first thing I thought was about speaking to you and having my words somewhat fall flat as they went in one ear and out the other. Some of the things you have done after it happened were good. You installed a new security system that alerts not just the office, but the surrounding area with a loud sound when a door is opened without a proximity card. But after a traumatic event happened with some students in the same hallway hearing the gunshots and screams, you found it fit to search students with clear backpacks every morning. I have to look officers in the eye every single morning and tell them, yeah, I'm okay, as I empty my pockets and give them my Chromebook and folder. I am then wanded down as I hear statements like, you know, they do this every day in Atlanta. I don't really care what you think about the situation because I'm not here to change your mind. But Anthony brought a gun into the school, not through the back doors that we enter through at the beginning of the school day, but through a propped open door as he re-entered the school at the end of the school day. So I can't wrap my mind around the police searches every day at 8:30 in the morning. I don't know about you, but having a metal detector close to your body as you start your day is really depressing. And you know, deep down, that if these clear backpacks and mandatory searches were at somewhere like Farragut or West, you would be berated by every parent and teacher. You are now putting a story to every kid that goes to that school. And it's unbelievably dangerous because when I'm interacting with people who've heard that story, they view me as a threat. I know you have a couple schools where the majority of the students are Black. So you really need to focus on what I'm about to say instead of whatever biases, conscious or unconscious, you have. There are two things you can do to transform these schools into places of either to blossom education in the young, hurt minds of students, or funnels and pipelines that take the students in your schools and put them in private prisons. And if you don't see the negative police encounters, if you don't see that negative police encounters and them seeing school as an entrapment to escape harmful for a student whose relatives or family and friends have been killed by and imprisoned by cops, then we've already lost. I showed you the choice you had last time I was here, and it's clear that you've, at least for the moment, decided to kneel. If you don't do anything, then you've killed a whole entire generation of Black people, not just their bodies, but their spirits, dreams, and hope for a better future. I've been walking around the halls of your school like a zombie because I'm already dead, because I'm viewed as a thug. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to speak to us again. That concludes public forum.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We are adjourned.